Hey everyone, and welcome to my Premiere Pro course. I've spent hundreds of hours over the last 5 years perfecting my concise yet detailed tutorial format. My unique style of teaching has even been promoted by Adobe on Twitter. In this course, you'll find over 125 short but detailed lessons. These lessons will help you master the basics, learn some more advanced techniques, and I'll even show you how to make more than 60 of the most popular effects. My goal for this course is to not only get you comfortable working in Premiere Pro, but get you making professional videos. I also plan to update this course over the years to keep up with any changes in Premiere Pro that affect my current content. Alright, thanks for watching this little intro video, and I hope I'll see you in my course. Okay, the first time you open up Premiere Pro, you're going to be greeted by this pop-up. To create our first project, let's click this New Project button. Now, in the New Project pop-up, give your project a name. And then choose a location to save your project by clicking the Browse button. I'm just going to save my project in this first location that comes up, but be sure to select the location on your computer you'd like to save your project. Okay, now the good news is we don't need to change anything else in here. These default settings will work fine for 99% of you. So let's just hit OK to create our first new project. Alright, that's all for this lesson. In the next one, we'll be learning how to import media. Let's start this lesson off by making sure that we have the same layout by going up to Window, Workspaces, Reset to Save Layout. Okay, now down in the bottom left corner, you'll see a project panel. The easiest way to import media into your project is by double-clicking inside the project panel where it says Import Media to start. You can also use the Control-I keyboard shortcut on Windows or Command-I on Mac. Now in the import pop-up, navigate to and select the media you'd like to import. This can be a video, image, or audio. Once you have your media selected, click Open to import it into the project panel's bin. You can also import multiple files at once within the import pop-up. In here, simply hold down the Control key on Windows or Command key on Mac while selecting all the files you'd like to import, and then click the Open button. Okay, and there I added 3 more files into my media bin. Notice how Premiere color codes your files based on their types, which makes them easier to find. Video files will be blue and purple, audio will be green, and images will be pink. To view any of your imported files, simply double-click one of them in the project bin to view it above in the source panel. You can either hit the play button or press the spacebar to play back and pause your media. Okay, and that's all for this lesson. In the next one, we'll start organizing our media on the timeline to make something creative. To start this lesson off, I just imported an image, a couple video clips, and an audio clip into my project bin. Let's start by dragging a video clip from the project bin onto the timeline. Whenever you drag a video clip onto a new timeline, it's going to create a new sequence named after your video clip. For now, just think of the sequence as the container that holds your timeline's information. Your sequence will be represented as a green clip in the project panel. So if you ever accidentally close your sequence on the timeline, you can easily recover it by double-clicking the sequence over here. The sequence's settings will automatically be set to the resolution and frame rate of the first video you add to a new timeline. So if I drag the 720p video onto my timeline after my first video, it's not going to fit into my frame rate because my first video already set my sequence to 1080p. But don't worry, you can easily rescale your video to fit in the frame by right-clicking the offending clip on the timeline and selecting Scale to Frame Size. Now if you want to add background audio to your video, you simply drag your audio clip onto any one of these audio tracks below your video clip on the timeline. You can change when your audio starts playing with your video by dragging the audio clip under your video to reposition it to a later part. I'm sure you've noticed how there are multiple audio tracks and video tracks on the timeline. With the extra video tracks, you can do things like drag an image over an existing video clip to overlay it, or you could even overlay a video on top of another video. The extra audio tracks allow you to add background music or even additional voiceover that can be dubbed over the music. We'll learn more about using multiple tracks in the future, but for our next lesson, we'll be discussing how to navigate our timeline. To begin this lesson, I just added a video clip to my timeline. Playing back your video clip is simple. You can either hit the play button in the program window or press the spacebar on your keyboard. To pause the video, click the stop button or press the spacebar again. The length of each clip on your timeline and the corresponding time above represents its duration. You can navigate quickly through your video by dragging the playhead at the top of your timeline to scrub through it. Or you can click at any point on the time ruler to move the playhead to that position. It's important to remember that wherever your playhead is on the timeline is what's going to show up in the program window. So if I were to overlay an image over my video clip, my image is only going to show up in the program window when my playhead is over my image clip on the timeline. Okay, now to move through your clip frame by frame, use these right and left buttons next to the play button in the program window. You can also use the left and right arrow keys on your keyboard to move the playhead frame by frame. Another very important part of this timeline is using this bottom scroll bar to zoom. Zooming allows you to see more or less of your timeline for precise editing. To zoom, simply drag either circular end of the bottom scroll bar to zoom in and out. An even faster way to zoom your timeline is by holding down the Alt key on Windows or Option key on Mac while scrolling with your mouse wheel. Additionally, dragging the middle of the scroll bar will allow you to navigate to different parts of your zoomed in timeline. Alright, now let's drag another video clip onto the timeline and attach it to the end of the first clip. Your clips should snap together effortlessly if you have this magnet toggle turned on, which you pretty much always should. My new video clip has some audio attached that I don't want, so I'm just going to toggle on this M next to my audio track to mute it. In addition, you can hide your video clips by using the I toggle next to each track, although for this lesson, I want to see my video. When you have multiple clips on your timeline, you can easily move between cuts by pressing the up and down arrow keys on your keyboard. The home key on your keyboard will take you to the beginning of your timeline, while the end key will take you to the timeline's end. Another little shortcut that's useful is holding down the shift key on your keyboard while pressing the space bar to play back your timeline from the beginning. Okay, and that's all for this lesson. In the next one, I'll cover cutting and trimming clips on the timeline. To start this lesson, we're going to trim the beginning and end of a clip on the timeline. So let's begin by making sure you're using the selection tool on the toolbar. Now to trim the beginning of a clip, move the playhead to where you'd like your clip to start. Then hover over the very beginning of your clip so that your cursor changes to a bracket. Drag your clip to the playhead's position to make the trim. And I'm just going to drag my clip back to the start of my timeline so that playback starts at my trim position. Trimming the end of your clip works basically the same way. This time, position your playhead to where you want your clip to end. Then drag the end of your clip to the playhead's position. Okay, next let's say you want to cut something out of the middle of your clip. To do that, let's begin by moving the playhead to the start of the part you want to cut out. Then select the razor tool over in the toolbar or press the C key on your keyboard to select it and use it to make a cut at the playhead's position. Next, move the playhead to the end of the part you want to cut out and make a cut at that position. Now simply reselect the selection tool and select the clip you just cut out. Hit the delete key on your keyboard to get rid of your selected clip. And I'm just going to select the empty space between my clips and hit the delete key to rejoin my clips together. Keep in mind that you can make cuts without placing the playhead first, and you can also trim without the playhead. But you really want to use the playhead most of the time because it helps with being precise when making your edits. Okay, and those are the trimming basics. In the next lesson, I'll be covering some super useful techniques and shortcuts for making your cuts. To begin this lesson, I have a video clip on my timeline that I cut into 3 pieces, and I'd like to delete this middle section. Just selecting my middle clip and pressing the delete key leaves this gap that I also have to delete to bring my clips back together. Fortunately, Premiere Pro comes with a function called ripple delete, which allows you to shift your clips together while deleting. To ripple delete, simply select your clip on the timeline and then hold down the shift key while pressing delete. Okay, and there it deleted my middle clip while shifting my clips together automatically. Additionally, you can shift clips automatically while trimming at a cut. To do this, position the playhead to where you want to trim your clip to. Then, while holding down the control key, hover over the end of your clip so your cursor changes to a yellow bracket and drag it to the playhead's position. Okay, and there my clips stayed together after the trim. If you're not a fan of holding down the control key, you can also trim by using the ripple edit tool. With this tool, you can trim at any cut and your clips will automatically shift together. Premiere Pro also lets you skip using the razor tool altogether to make cuts if you desire. Simply position the playhead to where you'd like to make a cut and then select the clip you'd like to cut. Use the Ctrl-K keyboard shortcut to make a cut at the playhead's position. Keep in mind that if you don't select your clip before you cut and you're using multiple tracks, Premiere Pro will also cut any track that's toggled on. So using Ctrl-K with this audio track will cut both my video and audio clip. Simply toggle off any tracks you don't want to cut before using the shortcut. Now when I make another cut with Ctrl K, it'll only cut on my video track since it's the only track that's toggled on. Okay, and that's it for this lesson. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. To start this lesson off, I'm just going to double click one of my video clips in the project bin to open it up in the source panel. Before we begin, you may be wondering why you'd want to edit your clips in the source panel and not just do everything on the timeline. Well, in particular, long videos can take a long time to import into the timeline when you might only be using a small part of them. In addition, editing long clips on the timeline can be a hassle, especially if you're trying to edit around other clips. So in the source panel, position the playhead to where you want your trimmed clip to start. Then click this Mark In button to set a starting point for your trim. Next, let's move the playhead to where you want your clip to end, and click the Mark Out button to set an ending point. Now simply drag the video from the source panel onto your timeline to add only the clip that you marked in and out. Okay, it's that simple, and that's all for this lesson. See you in the next one. Alright, let's begin by going up to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts. If your keyboard layout preset is set to the Adobe Premiere Pro default, your Q and W keys should already be set to ripple trimming your clips to the playhead's position. This is really useful because you can position the playhead to where you'd like to trim off the end of a clip and press a W key to trim its end to that position. Or you can move the playhead to the beginning of a clip and press a Q key to trim the start of the clip to that position. Though the game-changing part of these shortcuts is when you have two clips right next to each other. So I can trim off the end of this clip while shifting my trailing clip forward. This avoids any dragging or repositioning of clips. Okay, now let's go back over to the keyboard shortcuts to change a few things to make editing even faster. In the search box, type delete. For the clear command, I'm going to click to the right of the delete shortcut to add another shortcut. Now let's press the Z key on our keyboard to set the key to delete. Now we can delete without moving our right hand off the mouse. You might get a warning down here that it's already in use by the zoom tool, but if you're like me and don't use that tool, just ignore the message. Otherwise, set it to another key on your left hand. Now let's click next to ripple delete to add another shortcut. Hold down the Shift key and Z key on your keyboard to set it to Shift Z. Finally, let's type add edit into the search box. The add edit command lets you make a cut at the playhead's position. Click next to Ctrl K to add a new shortcut for it. Then press the X key on your keyboard to set it to the X key. Now I can make cuts without moving my hand off the mouse or even using the razor tool. Alright, once you're done assigning shortcuts, click OK to save your changes. You should now be able to delete clips simply by pressing the Z key. You can ripple delete clips by holding down Shift and Z. And you're able to make cuts at the playhead's position simply by pressing X. Remember that it makes a cut based on what tracks you have selected over here. So if I deselect my audio track, it's only going to cut my video track. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To start the lesson, I imported a video I'd like to use as my background, an image that I'd like to overlay on that background, as well as a video I'd like to overlay. Before we do anything, I'm going to turn off this leftmost A1 toggle for my bottom selected video because doing so will allow me to drag my video onto the timeline without bringing along its audio. Okay, now let's begin by dragging the video you'd like to use as a background onto the V1 track on your timeline. Then we'll drag the video we'd like to overlay onto the track above it. Be sure to position your overlaid video clip to where you want it to play back on your timeline. And I'm also going to drag the end of my overlaid clip to shorten its duration. Okay, now when my playhead reaches my overlaid video, we'll see it in the program panel, though we'll want to reduce its size so that we can see our video underneath it. To resize it, first make sure that your overlaid video clip is selected on the timeline, and then double-click your overlaid image in the program panel. Okay, my double-click worked because I can see my overlaid video's anchor point, but I'm not seeing sizing handles yet because my overlaid video doesn't fit into my frame. So if you're working with two different resolutions and this happens to you, just right-click your overlaid video clip on the timeline and select Scale to Frame Size. Alright, now that we can see the sizing handles, let's drag any of them to resize the video. To reposition the overlaid video in the frame, just drag anywhere inside it. Okay, now that we have a nice looking overlaid video, let's move on to overlaying our image. Let's drag our overlaid image from the project panel onto the track above the overlaid video clip on the timeline. Stacking them like this allows us to see all of our overlaid media at once. Now with our image selected on the timeline, let's double click it in the program panel to reposition and resize it in the same way we did with our video. If you ever accidentally click on your background video in the frame, you'll have to reselect your image clip on the timeline before double clicking it in the program panel again. Finally, if you want to rotate your image, just hover over one of the anchor points and then slowly move your cursor away from the point until it changes into a curved arrow. Then simply click and drag from the cursor's position to rotate your image. Okay, and that's all for this lesson. In the next one, I'll teach you how to more precisely overlay media by using the Effect Controls panel. To get started, I added a background video to my timeline as well as this video of a rose overlaid on top of it. While I'm using an overlaid video for this lesson, keep in mind that using an image will work exactly the same way. Okay, let's begin by selecting our overlaid video clip on the timeline and then going up here to Effect Controls. Under Motion, you'll see properties for position, scale, and rotation. First, let's change our overlaid media scale by dragging its corresponding value to the left or right. Notice how rescaling it keeps the original aspect ratio by default. You can also change the scale manually by clicking to select its value, and then typing in your desired scale. But let's say you want to stretch your media and aren't overly concerned with keeping its original aspect ratio. To do this, uncheck the Uniform Scale checkbox under the scale's value. Now you're free to change the scale's width and height independently of each other. Keep in mind that if you stretch your media too much, you'll lose some quality. Alright, next let's change our media's position. Dragging the position's first value allows you to reposition your media from left to right on the x-axis, while dragging the position's second value repositions your media up and down on the y-axis. Additionally, you can click either of the x and y values to change the position manually if you're trying to be super precise. Lastly, let's change the media's rotation by dragging the rotation's value. And of course, you can click the rotation's value and enter in a number to be more precise. Okay, and that's all for this lesson. Now remember that while I used a video for this example, using effect controls like this will work the same for images as well. To get started, I just added a video track with an adjustment layer on top of it to my timeline. Let's begin by heading over to the Effects panel. Type Transform into the search box. Then drag the effect onto the adjustment layer. Go up to Effect Controls for the adjustment layer and scroll down to the Transform effect. Now you're able to change the scale, position, or whatever else you'd like with this effect. Okay, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Let's start by going over to the Project panel. Click the New Item button. Select Color Matte. The default settings work fine, so just hit OK. Now just use the Color Picker tool to select the color of your choice. Hit OK once you're finished. You can name your color matte if you want, but I'm just going to leave mine as it is. Now just drag it onto your timeline to add it to your project. And finally, to change your color mask duration, you can just drag the edges of the clip. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To begin, I just added a video to my timeline that has some audio. The first way to change the volume is to right-click your audio clip on the timeline and select Audio Gain. In the pop-up, we're just going to be concerned with these top two options, Set Gain and Adjust Gain. You can think of gain as just another way of saying volume. Starting with Set Gain, let's select its blue value and change it to a negative number to decrease our audio's gain. To increase the gain, enter a positive number instead, but start with small numbers so you don't blow your eardrums out. Set Gain differentiates itself from Adjust Gain by setting your track's volume to exactly the number you put in there. On the other hand, Adjust Gain works quite differently. Changing the Adjust Gain's value will add that number to whatever your Set Gain's value currently is. So putting a 2 in here will set my current volume's gain to 5 since I just set the gain to 3. Or putting a -4 in Adjust Gain will set my volume to -1. I think Adjust Gain is more useful because you probably won't like your first volume change and it's easier to add on to what your gain is already set to. Okay, the next way to change your volume is to select your audio clip on the timeline and go over to Effect Controls. Under Volume, you'll see a level setting which controls the volume. First, let's toggle off the blue stopwatch because we won't be keyframing. Now simply drag the levels value to the left or right to adjust the volume. And of course, you can click the levels value and type in a number manually if you want a specific volume. The final way to change your volume in Premiere Pro is to extend your audio track until you see this line going through the middle of it. Now simply drag the line downwards to decrease the volume, or drag it upwards to increase the volume. Okay, and that's all for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, to get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that has some audio I'd like to delete. Now, I can't delete the audio simply by selecting the audio clip on the timeline and hitting the delete key because it will also delete my video. Instead, what you can do is hold down the Alt key on Windows or Option key on Mac and select your audio clip. Now that only my audio is selected, I can hit the delete key to get rid of it. Another way to delete your audio is by right-clicking your video clip and selecting Unlink. Now you can select your audio and video clip independently and delete your audio clip easily. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just have a few clips here that I added to my timeline. Now for this tutorial, I just want to mute my middle clip's audio without actually deleting it. So to do that, I'm just going to select the clip and go up to Effect Controls. Under Audio Effects, change the volume's level to -1000. This will get converted to -infinity, which will essentially mute the clip. Okay, now when I play this back, my audio will get muted when it hits the middle clip. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I have 4 different audio clips on my timeline and I'd like to adjust the volume for them all at once. To do this, I'm going to click and drag on my timeline to select all of my audio clips. Then right-click them and select Audio Gain. Click the 0 next to Adjust Gain By. Now if you want to lower the volume, enter a negative value. If you want to increase the volume, enter a positive one. Okay, now all my audio clips have a lower volume. But let's say you only want to adjust the volume of certain clips like the first, third, and fourth one. To do this, hold down the Shift key while selecting the desired clips you'd like to change the volume for. Then just right-click one of the selected clips and go to Audio Gain. Now just adjust the gain by entering a positive or negative value like before. Alright, and now I adjusted the gain only for my selected clips. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Before we begin, you want to make sure you have an unused audio track that you can record your voiceover on. If you need an extra track, right-click on one of your audio tracks and select Add Track. Okay, let's start by right-clicking our audio track and selecting Customize. Then drag the microphone icon for voiceover recording onto your audio track next to the S. We also want to drag the R icon on there, which will allow us to enable recording. Next, we need to make sure our microphone is correctly set up before we record. Go to Edit, Preferences, Audio Hardware. Set the default input to your microphone if it isn't already. Next, let's head over to the Audio tab. In here, you want to make sure you have checked the Mute Input During Recording option. This way, if you're recording voiceover while a video is playing, it's not going to create an echoing feedback loop. Okay, we're done in here, so just hit OK. Back on our timeline, click the R next to your audio track to enable recording. Before we start recording, I'm just going to show you a few quick settings by right-clicking on my audio track and selecting Voice over Record Settings. Both post-roll and pre-roll are timers that count down to recording. Post-roll starts your timer while your footage is playing. I don't use this, so I'm going to leave it off. Pre-roll, on the other hand, starts a timer on a black screen before the recording starts. I want this on. One more thing to note is that you can change your audio recording sources here rather than going back to Preferences. Okay, now position your time head to where you want the recording to start, and then click the microphone button to start recording. Alright, this is a test recording. To stop recording, just hit the spacebar or click the microphone again. Now when I play this back, I now have an easy voiceover in Premiere. Alright, this is a test recording. Alright, that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a quick audio sample of me talking that I'd like to add some reverb to my timeline. I'm going to give this audio some reverb. I'm going to begin by making a cut at the point where I want the reverb to start ringing out. For you, this will probably be right before your last beat if you're doing music. Then right-click that cutout end clip and select Nest. Double-click the nested sequence to open it up. Drag your original audio file you imported below it in the nested sequence. Make sure that the bottom audio clip is selected and go up to Effect Controls. Under volume, change the level to -1000, which will translate to -infinity and completely mute your bottom track. Alright, now drag the end of the muted clip to however long you want your reverb for the top clip to ring out for. Okay, we're done messing around inside the nested sequence, so let's go back to the original composition. Drag the end of your nested clip to extend it with the silence audio we just created. Now go over to the Effects tab. Type reverb into the search box. Drag one of the reverb effects onto the nested clip. I'm just going to use surround reverb. Then go up to Effect Controls for your nested clip. Click the Presets button next to your reverb effect. Select a preset of your liking. I'm just going to use From the Front. Okay, now when I play this back, my audio will reverb out. I'm going to give this audio some reverb. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to fade in and out. Let's begin by going over to the Effects tab. In here, open up the Video Transitions folder, and then open up the Dissolve folder. Then select the Film Dissolve effect, and drag it to the very start of your video clip to fade it in. To fade out your clip instead, simply drag the Film Dissolve effect to the very end of your clip. Okay, and now when I play this back, my video fades in, and when it reaches the end, it fades out. To change the speed of your fade, simply hover your cursor over the end of the transition and drag it to adjust its duration. And I'll just do the same thing to extend my fade out. Alright, and now my fades happen more gradually. That's really it for this tutorial, but I'm going to explain why I don't use other dissolves like additive dissolve. So instead of the film dissolve, I'll just drag this additive dissolve to the start of my clip and extend its duration. When I play this back, you'll notice that extending its duration didn't slow down my dissolve, it just made the first part of my video black. So that's why I stick with the film dissolve over additive dissolve unless you want the extra black space. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added 2 clips to my timeline that I'd like to fade together. Let's begin by positioning our time marker at the cut between our clips and dragging the ends of this bar down here to zoom into it. Now let's go over to the Effects panel. Type Cross Dissolve into the search box. Drag the Cross Dissolve effect onto the cut between your clips. Now if it sticks to one side like mine and doesn't go to the middle, that's fine. Just select the transition and go over to Effect Controls. Change the alignment to center at cut. And there we have a fade between our 2 clips. Okay, this looks good, but if you want to change the duration of the cross dissolve, just drag the edge of the transition. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added some video clips to my timeline along with a music track below. Okay, let's begin by going over to the Effects panel. Open up the Audio Transitions folder and then open up the Crossfade folder. Now, if you want your audio to fade in or out linearly at a steady pace, the transition you want to use is Constant Gain. Drag this transition to the very beginning of your audio clip to fade it in. When you hover over the right spot, the clip will turn pink, letting you know that you can drop the transition there. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a simple fade in. To fade your music out, just drag the Constant Gain transition to the very end of your music clip instead. To increase or decrease the duration of your fade, drag the ends of this bar down here to zoom into it on your timeline. Then with the selection tool, drag the transition's end to adjust its duration. Okay, that works great, but I'm going to undo this and show you another way. Over in the Effects panel, drag the exponential fade to either the beginning or end of your audio clip. With this transition, your music will fade exponentially, meaning that at the beginning of the effect, it will fade in only a little bit, and towards the end, the fade will ramp up. You can also apply this transition at the end of the clip and adjust the duration by zooming in and dragging the end of the transition like before. So adding fades is really simple in Premiere. It just depends on whether you want a steady fade with constant gain, or a fade that starts out slow and ramps up like the exponential fade. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I have some clips that I'm going to add my default transition to by moving my time head between the 2 clips and using the Ctrl-D keyboard shortcut. By default, I have a cross dissolve. I want a different transition as my default, so I'm going to undo that. Head over to the Effects panel and open up Video Transitions. Find one you like, then right-click it and select Set Selected as Default Transition. Now when I use the Ctrl-D keyboard shortcut between my two clips, it applies my new push transition as the default. This looks okay, but I'd like my transition to go a little faster. To change your transition's default duration, go to Edit, Preferences, Timeline. In here, I'm just going to lower the video transition default duration to 15 frames. Okay, and now when I re-add my default transition, it'll be much faster. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added some clips to my timeline along with a dip to white transition that I would like to copy to the rest of my clips. Let's begin by selecting the transition and using the Ctrl-C keyboard shortcut to copy it. Then click and hold on the third tool down to bring up multiple options. Select the Rolling Edit tool. Now, while holding down the Shift key, click on all of the cuts you'd like to add the transition to. Use the Ctrl-V keyboard shortcut to paste your transitions to all your selected cuts. Alright, and there we have our transition copied to multiple clips. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create an easy whip pan transition in Premiere Pro. To get started, I just added 2 clips to my timeline that I'd like to add my transition between. Let's begin by right-clicking inside the project panel and going to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Then right-click the adjustment layer and select Speed/Duration. I'm working with 24 FPS footage, so I'm going to set mine to 8 frames. If you're working with 60 FPS footage, set it to around 20. Then position your adjustment layer directly above and in the middle of the cut. It helps to zoom into your timeline, and with your adjustment layer selected, hold down the Alt key on your keyboard while using the arrow keys to position it exactly in the middle of the cut. Then go over to the Effects panel and type Push in the search box. Drag the push effect between your 2 clips. Then select the transition and go up to Effect Controls. Change the duration to match your adjustment layer, so I'm just going to put 8 frames. Also, if you have a hard time placing your push transition between your clips, change the alignment here to center at cut. Now to add our blur, go back down to the Effects panel and type Directional Blur into the search box. Drag that effect onto your adjustment layer. Then in Effect Controls for your adjustment layer, change the direction to 90 degrees. And increase the blur length to 100. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a nice looking whip pan transition. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a fast and easy Luma fade in Premiere Pro. To get started, I just added 2 clips to my timeline. The first clip is an overhead shot of trees, and my second clip is a guy that I'd like to fade into the trees. For this effect, it helps if your subject that you like to fade in is darker than the background. Okay, let's begin by positioning the clip you'd like to fade in on top of your first clip. Then go over to the Effects panel. Type Gradient into the search box. Drag the Gradient Wipe effect onto your top clip. Then make sure your top clip is selected and go over to Effect Controls. Position the time marker at the start of your top clip. Under Gradient Wipe, change the transition completion to 100%. Then click the stopwatch next to transition completion to create a starting keyframe. Move the time marker to where you want your Luma fade completed by. Change the transition completion to 0% to create an ending keyframe. Lastly, make sure you check this Invert Gradient checkbox. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a nice looking Luma fade in Premiere. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added 2 clips to my timeline that I'd like to add a diagonal wipe transition to. Let's begin by going over to the Effects tab. Type Wipe into the search box. Scroll down under Video Transitions until you see the regular wipe transition. Then drag it between your 2 clips on the timeline. If you get this pop-up, just click OK. Alright, now that we have our wipe, let's turn it into a diagonal one. Select your wipe transition on the timeline. Go over to Effect Controls. In here, you should see a bunch of little arrows around a rectangle. Click the top left corner arrow to add a diagonal wipe that goes from the top left to the bottom right. Okay, and now when I play this back, we have a nice looking diagonal wipe. If you want your diagonal wipe to move in a different direction, just click on one of the other 3 corner arrows. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip that I'd like to use as my background to my timeline. To add our text, let's begin by selecting the type tool on the side of our timeline. Then click anywhere in the video preview and start typing to add your text. Premiere will automatically create this pink clip for your text above your video clip on the timeline. You can drag the clip center to change where your text shows up in your video. You can also drag the edge of the text clip to adjust its duration. Now to change your text properties like its font, hover over your text and drag from the beginning or end of your text to select all of it. You can also just click your text with the Type tool and use the Ctrl-A keyboard shortcut to select it all. Once it's selected, go over to Effect Controls. Under text, you can do things like change the font and its size. You can use these buttons to turn your text bold or italic. Under Appearance, you can change the color of your text by clicking the color box next to fill and selecting your desired color. To give your text a stroke, check the checkbox next to it and change the stroke color if you desire. To increase your stroke's width, just drag this number to the right. You can also easily give your text a background or a shadow by checking their boxes and adjusting a few settings. Under Transform, you can drag these position values to change where your text is located in the frame. Although, I prefer to just use the Selection tool and move it in the frame. One other thing you might want to do under Transform is decrease the text opacity to make it more transparent. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Let's begin by clicking on the Graphics tab up top. Select the Type tool and click in the frame to type out your credits. I already have a list, so I'm just going to paste it in. In the Essential Graphics panel, click on your text under Edit to select the entire block of text. Now I'm able to make some adjustments. First, I'm going to center align my text. Then I'm going to click this horizontal center button to move my text to the middle of the frame. You can also change the font and do some other stuff in here, but I'm satisfied, so let's move on. Click directly under your text in the Essential Graphics panel to deselect it. Click the Roll checkbox to enable the Rolling Credits feature. Okay, and now we have our rolling credits. To speed up or slow down the roll, just drag the end of your clip on the timeline to change its duration. Alright, this looks a little better. And if you don't want the credits to start off screen or end off screen, you can just uncheck these boxes. The pre-roll and post-roll settings are there for if you want to pause before or after you start rolling the credits. The ease in and ease out settings will just add a little speed up or slow down effect as the credits enter or leave the frame. Alright, and that's all I have for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, to get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline along with an audio clip. Let's begin by going up to File, New, Captions. In the pop-up's first drop-down, the first option will be for standard definition closed captions, which allows the user to turn them on and off. Below that, there's an option for closed captions for high definition. But I'm going to select open captions because I want my captions permanently burned into my video for social media. Now let's drag the captions from our project panel onto the track above your video clip on the timeline. And I'm just going to drag my caption clip's end so that its duration matches my video's duration. Alright, so each individual caption you add will be represented by this black bar on the caption clip. You can double click that black bar to open up the captions panel. In here, the first thing you're going to want to do is type your caption in this box where it prompts you to. Now that you have your text, there's a bunch of settings to play around with, like changing the font size of your text. You may want to drag the edge of this panel so that you can see all of the settings. Another useful thing you can do is change the caption's opacity by clicking the square and dragging the percentage value. Additionally, any of these small grid squares will allow you to change the position of your caption in the frame. You can also change your caption's position more precisely by dragging these X and Y values. Next, I'm going to adjust the duration of my caption so it lines up with the first section of my audio. You can do this by dragging the ends of the black caption bar on the clip. You can also change when the caption plays back by dragging the middle of the black bar. Okay, this looks good, so let's add our next caption by clicking this plus button in the captions panel. Then I'll just drag the middle of my caption to reposition it, and I'll drag its ends to match the duration of my next bit of audio. Now, back in the captions panel, I'll just type some text for my next caption. As you can see, my second caption will keep the formatting of my first caption, which is really useful. Okay, and to finish captioning, you just keep adding captions and lining them up to the parts of the clip you want. Once you're finished adding captions and go to export your video, under the Captions tab, you'll see Export Options, which will let you burn your captions into your video, create a sidecar file, or simply not include them. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to put text behind objects in Premiere. To get started, I just added a video clip with the text clip above it on my timeline. Let's begin by selecting your text clip and going up to Effect Controls. Position your time head at the start of your clip. Under Opacity, click on the Pen tool. Click somewhere around the edge of your object to create your first point. Then continue clicking around it to trace it. When you get to the last point, make sure you connect it to the first point or the effect won't work. Check the inverted checkbox to apply the mask to the object. Okay, this looks good, but unfortunately when our object moves, the mask doesn't move with it, so we need to add animation. Position the time head at the start of your clip where you made your trace. Click on the stopwatch toggle next to Mask Path to create your first keyframe. Move the time head to the end of your clip. Select the mask in Effect Controls so that you can see it. Click and drag to move your trace mask to where the object is. You can also use the handles to reposition your points. Okay, this looks better, but it's still not quite matching up, so I'm going to adjust the trace at a few more points to fix it up. This effect works best for simple objects. If you have complicated movements, you're going to have to create a keyframe for nearly every frame of animation. Alright, and there you have it. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to add a lower thirds name bar to. Let's begin by going over to the Graphics tab. Over in the Essential Graphics panel, make sure you're in the Browse tab and select My Templates. In the search box, type thirds and press enter. Now in the results, you'll see a bunch of animated lower thirds titles that you can drag onto your timeline. If you want to overlay the lower thirds title on your video, just drag it onto the track above your video. To edit the text, simply select the text tool and click on the text to edit it. Sometimes there will be this little yellow T in the corner of the templates letting you know that you don't have the required font. To get the font, just right-click the template and select Sync Missing Fonts. Okay, and now I can add the template to my timeline. Next, I'm going to delete these lower third templates to show you another way to add them. In the Essential Graphics panel, make sure you're in the Browse tab and select Adobe Stock. In here, you'll find even more free lower thirds templates, but from the internet. Type thirds in the search box and press enter. Then check the free option. Now simply drag your desired template above your video clip on the timeline. Some of these will take a little while to load since they can have fancy animations. Also keep in mind that despite these being templates, you can still adjust their duration by dragging the clip's end with the selection tool. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a single text clip to my timeline that I'd like to animate changing colors. Let's begin by holding down the Alt key on your keyboard and dragging the text clip to the side to make a copy of it. Then make sure your two text clips are right next to each other. Now select your second text clip and go over to Effect Controls. Open up the text properties. Then change the fill color to the color of your choice. Okay, now I have two text clips of different colors. Next, let's go over to the Effects panel and type Cross Dissolve into the search box. Drag the Cross Dissolve transition to the cut between your two clips on the timeline. Alright, and now when I play this back, my text animates from white to red. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, to begin, I added some footage to my timeline that I'd like to change the speed of. The first way to change speed is by right-clicking the clip you'd like to change the speed of and selecting Speed/Duration. For the speed, enter a number larger than 100 to speed up your video. For example, entering 300% will increase my video to 3 times its original speed. Or you can enter a number less than 100 to slow it down. Entering 50% will play back your clip at half speed. You can also click and drag the blue speed value to change the speed in a less precise way. Keep in mind that changing the speed will affect your clip's duration. So if you have any trailing clips, be sure to check ripple edit to prevent unwanted gaps. Okay, now my video is playing back faster. The next way to change a clip speed is by clicking and holding on the third tool down and selecting the rate stretch tool. Using the rate stretch tool, just drag the end of any clip to change its speed. Unfortunately, as of the 2020 version, there's no way to shift your trailing clips when speeding things up, so you'll have to manually reconnect them. Likewise, it won't allow you to slow down the front clip when they're next to each other due to the lack of the ripple feature. Well, unless you make space for slowing down your clip first. Alright, and for the last way to change the speed, let's drag the top of the track we're using to expand it until we can see this line going through it. Then right-click your clip and go to Show Clip Keyframes, Time Remapping, Speed. Now simply drag the line in the middle of your clip up or down to increase or decrease its speed. Like the rate stretch tool, you can't ripple edit using this method, but it will be useful in the next tutorial when we learn how to speed ramp. Okay, and that's all for this lesson. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, to start this lesson, I added a video clip to my timeline. Let's begin by expanding our video track so that we can see this line going through it. Next, let's right-click the FX square in the top left corner of your clip, then hover over Time Remapping and select Speed. Now, while holding down the Control key on your keyboard, click on the line where you'd like your speed ramp to start. This will create a speed marker at that point. Then drag the line after the marker up or down to set the final speed you want your ramp to eventually reach. I'm going to drag mine up to increase my clip speed. Okay, now my clip speeds up when it reaches the marker, but it does it instantly and not gradually with a ramp. So to create our ramp, let's drag the second half of our marker to the right. Keep in mind that how far you drag the marker is going to control how quickly your speed change ramps up. Alright, now my clip ramps up over time until it reaches the second half of the marker. To smooth out the ramp, select one of the halves of your marker to see this point with handles. If you're speeding up footage like me, drag the top handle to the right to create a curve which will smooth out your speed ramp. Okay, and there my speed ramp is more smooth. Keep in mind that you can change the final speed even after creating your ramp by dragging the line after the second half of the marker. Now to bring your clip back to regular speed, we're going to create a second marker. While holding down the Control key, click on the line where you'd like to start slowing things down. Then, after the marker, drag the line down to set it back to a lower speed of 100%. To make the speed ramp down, simply drag the second half of the marker to the right. Finally, I'll just smooth out my second ramp by dragging its top handle to the left. Alright, now when I play this back, my clip speeds up, stays sped up for a bit, and then slows down to regular speed. One popular effect is to speed up and slow down your clip all at once by moving all your markers close together. Then drag the last part of the line further down to add slow motion instead of just bringing your clip back to normal speed. Remember that if you're using slow motion with lower frame rates, you'll need to add optical flow to your slowdown clips to smooth things out. So right-click your clip, go to Time Interpolation, and select Optical Flow. Then with your clip selected, go up to Sequence, Render Selection. We're just rendering the selection because optical flow can be hard on your computer's hardware, and we want it to play back smoothly in the preview. Okay, and there I have this nice looking sped up and then slow down speed ramp effect. And that's all for this lesson. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, so there are 3 different ways to freeze a frame in Premiere Pro. The first way, which I think is the most useful, begins by positioning the time marker on the timeline to where you want to freeze your frame. Right-click your clip and select Insert Frame Hold Segment. This will insert a 2-second frame hold at the time marker's position. To make your frame hold longer or shorter, hold down the Control key on your keyboard if you're using Windows, or the Command key on Mac while positioning your cursor at the end of the frame hold clip. The cursor should turn into a yellow bracket with an arrow. Drag it to extend or decrease its duration, and the trailing clips will automatically shift with the frame hold. This is called ripple editing. Now you can extend the duration without ripple editing by just moving your trailing clips before dragging the frame hold's end, but I think control dragging the end will save you a lot of time. Alright, I'm going to undo my frame hold and show you the second way to freeze a frame. Position your time marker to where you want to freeze the frame. Right-click your clip and select Add Frame Hold. This will make a cut and freeze the rest of your clip, so you really only want to use this method if you are finished with the clip and just want to freeze its end. Okay, now I'm going to undo this and show you the third way, which is creating an image out of a still shot. Position the time marker to where you want to freeze the frame. Under the video preview, click this little camera button to export the frame. Give it a name if you want and select the image format you'd like to save it as. And make sure you check the Import into Project checkbox. Then just drag the still image from the project panel to the track above your clip on the timeline at the time marker's position. Now if you want your clip to keep playing normally after the frame hold, you're going to want to make a cut at the time marker's position where the still image starts. Then just drag your cut clip to the end of your image. Okay, and now it freezes my frame before it continues to play back normally. Alright, and those are all 3 ways to freeze a frame in Premiere Pro. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to reverse. Let's begin by right-clicking our clip on the timeline and selecting Speed/Duration. In the pop-up, click the Reverse Speed checkbox and hit OK. Alright, and now when I play this back, my clip is reversed. Keep in mind that you can also select your clip on the timeline and use the Ctrl-R keyboard shortcut to quickly open up the Speed/Duration pop-up. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, if you've gotten into this situation where you have clips above or below your video you'd like to do a frame hold on, and when you right-click your video and select Insert Frame Hold Segment, it inserts a frame hold but also splits your other clips in half, which isn't desired. So in the past, I just drag my clips back together and leave them cut up, which is kind of a messy way of handling it. I'm going to show you a better way to insert frame hold, so I'm going to undo that. Next to the tracks, you'd like to avoid splitting with the frame hold, click the Toggle Lock Track button to lock them from being edited. Now when I right-click my clip and select Insert Frame Hold Segment, my frame hold will get created without splitting or affecting my other tracks. And when you're ready to edit your other tracks again, just click the Toggle Lock Track button again to unlock them. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, to get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to crop. Let's begin by right-clicking our sequence in the project panel and going to Sequence Settings. In here, change the frame size to your liking. I'm going to set mine to 1080 by 1080, which will create a square aspect ratio for social media. Okay, and there my frame size has changed, and my resolution will be set to it when I export. Now let's go over to the Effects tab and type Auto Reframe into the search box. Drag the Auto Reframe effect onto your clip, and it will automatically keep your subject in the frame with the help of keyframes created by AI. But let's say you have a few clips on your timeline and you want to auto-frame the whole sequence. To do this, simply right-click your sequence in the project panel and select Auto Reframe Sequence. Change the aspect ratio to what you'd like. I'm going to keep mine at square and click Create. Alright, now this will create a new sequence with all auto-framed clips. To demonstrate how to crop manually instead, I'm going to get rid of these extra clips and the auto-frame effect, but keep the edited sequence's frame size. Now either use the Move tool to reposition the part of the video you'd like to crop in the frame, or change the clip's position in Effect Controls. This works fine, but there's an even easier way to manually crop a single clip. To do that, I'm going to undo all this and go back to my clip with its original resolution. Make sure the timeline panel is selected and use the Ctrl-M keyboard shortcut to open up the export window. In the upper left corner, go over to the Source tab, then click the Crop tool just below it. Drag the handles to crop your video to your liking. Hover over the crop video to see its resolution, which you'll need in a moment. Under Basic Video Settings, uncheck Width and Height, and click this link toggle to turn off the scale to aspect ratio. Change the width and height to the resolution you got from hovering over your crop video. Now when you export this, the output will be cropped as you see in the preview with your entered resolution. The final way to crop is if you want to do a video in video type effect. For this, I'll crop this top clip on my timeline and this bottom clip. Alright, let's go over to the Effects panel and type Crop into the search box. Drag the crop effect onto your top clip. Now make sure your top video clip is selected and go over to Effect Controls. Under Crop, drag the left, right, top, and bottom values to crop out the part of the video you want. Now go up to Position and drag the position's values to change where the crop video is in the frame. Alright, and those are a few of the best ways to crop video in Premiere Pro. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, to get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to loop. Let's begin by making a cut in the middle of our video to cut it in half. Then drag the top half above it onto the next track. Now drag your lower clip so that its beginning is overlapping with the top clip's end. Next, let's go over to the effects panel and type cross into the search box. Drag the cross dissolve transition onto the end of your top clip. And I'm just going to drag the transition's end so that it starts when my clips first overlap. Okay, and there I have my transition at the cut. Now you can drag to select both clips, and then while holding down the Alt key on your keyboard, simply drag them to make a copy to attach to the end of the first loop. The great thing about this technique is that because I cut and swap my clips at the beginning, this cut will be smooth despite looking like a hard cut. With this, you can continue copying and pasting the loop until you're satisfied with its length. If I were to do this a simple way by duplicating my clip, putting a cross dissolve between it, and then making copies, you would have cuts without the transition, so you'd have to continue adding the cross dissolve every time you pasted new loops. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this useful. Alright, so I have a project here that I just finished up and I want to export. To do that, let's go to File, Export, Media. You can also just use the Control-M keyboard shortcut to open up the export settings on Windows and Command-M on Mac. Under Export Settings, make sure your format is set to H.264. And for the preset, just use one of these YouTube preset settings based on your sequence's resolution. I'm working with 1280 by 720 resolution, so I'm going to select the YouTube 720 preset. If you're not sure what your sequence resolution is, just look under Summary at the source where you'll see it. Under the Video tab, leave the width, height, frame rate field order, aspect, and TV standard alone. But make sure you check the Render at Maximum Depth setting. The encoding settings are also fine the way they are, just make sure the profile is set to high and level is at 4.2. However, if your footage is HDR, make sure you set the profile to high 10 and check Rec 2020 color primaries. Then check high dynamic range. But I'm just going to switch my profile back to high since this isn't HDR footage. For the bitrate setting, change the bitrate encoding to VBR2 pass. Increase the target bitrate and maximum bitrate to 32. This will help make sure that YouTube doesn't compress your video too much. Finally, check Use Maximum Render Quality. Okay, and those are all my settings. To save this as a preset, click the first button next to Preset and give it a name. Now you can click the preset dropdown and select your preset whenever you want to export a video to YouTube. To finish up and save your video to your computer, just click Export. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, I just added a clip I'd like to export to my timeline, and I'm going to use the Control-M keyboard shortcut to open up the export settings. In here, my preset is usually set to match source high bitrate. Now that sounds like high quality, but if you scroll down to the bitrate settings, you'll see that my target bitrate is only set to 10 and my maximum is set to 12 out of a total of 50. This would probably be fine if you're working with 1080p footage at 30 frames per second or lower. Though I find that if I'm working with higher frame rate footage or high resolutions, this doesn't always do the job. So if that's the case, I'd recommend changing the preset to Adaptive High Bitrate, which will give you a custom bitrate based on the resolution and frame rate of your video. As you can see, this basically tripled my bitrate and the size of my video because I'm using 60 FPS footage. Now while Adaptive High Bitrate usually gives me the absolute best quality, I'm not too fond of how it tripled my file size as well. I find Adaptive Medium Bitrate to be a good middle ground that gives me good image quality along with a slightly lower file size. Of course, you can tweak the bitrate settings manually and put it above 30 for every video and you'll probably be fine, but I find the adaptive presets to work really well. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline. Now let's begin by dragging the time marker around the timeline to the frame that you'd like to save as an image. You can also use the left and right arrow keys on your keyboard for more precise frame-by-frame control. Once you have the frame you'd like to save, click this little camera button under the video preview to export the frame. You can also use the Ctrl-Shift-E keyboard shortcut. In the pop-up, name your image if you'd like. You can also change the format, but I'm okay with JPEG, so I'll just leave that. Select the Browse button to change the location on your computer you'd like to save your image to. And lastly, you can check Import into Project if you want a copy of your image saved into your Premiere Pro project. Now just hit OK to export and save your frame. Okay, and there I have my frame imported into my project as an image. And you can find your image on your computer and drag it into Photoshop to edit it as a thumbnail if you'd like. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover simple movement animation. To get started, I just added an image above my background video on the timeline. Let's begin by dragging the image on the timeline to where you want it to first come on screen. Drag its ends to adjust its duration if you'd like. Then make sure your image is selected on the timeline and go over to Effect Controls. In here, position the time head to where you want your image to start moving. I'm just going to move mine to the very start so that my image animates as soon as it appears on my video. Then drag the position's left and right values to move your image to where you want it to first show up on the screen. Click the timer button next to position to create your first keyframe, which will represent the starting point for your animation. Next, position the time head to where you want your image to be done moving by. Then change the position's values to where you want your image to move to by that time. This will automatically create a second keyframe, which represents your image moving from the first keyframe to this point. Alright, now we have a very simple movement animation. If you want to create additional movements, like moving this arrow to some other point after the first, you just position the time head to where you want that next animation to end, and then change the position's values to create a third keyframe. And now my image moves to the second keyframe's location, and then to the third's. But let's say you want the image to pause in between the second and third keyframes animation and then move again after the pause. I'm going to delete this third keyframe and instead click the little circle between these two arrows next to position. This will create an additional keyframe at the time head's location, which represents the current position of your image. This means that however big this gap is between keyframes 2 and 3 is how long your image will stay put at the second keyframe's location. Now I'm going to move the time head after the third keyframe and reposition my image again to automatically create a fourth keyframe. Now when I play this back, my image will move to the second keyframe's location, pause at the gap between keyframes 2 and 3, and then continue after 3 to the fourth location. Alright, this works great, but in my opinion, the movement looks kind of stiff. To smooth out your animation, click and drag to select the keyframes you'd like to smooth. I'm just going to select all of them. Right-click one of them and hover over Temporal Interpolation. Select one of these options to smooth out your animation. I'm just going to select Auto Bezier, but you can experiment with the other options and change them at any time. Okay, now my animation looks much smoother. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a smooth and professional text animation in Premiere Pro. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline along with some text on the track above it. Alright, let's begin by selecting the text clip on the timeline and going over to Effect Controls. In here, expand the text settings by clicking this arrow. Move the time marker to where you want to start your animation on your text clip. I'm just going to move it to the beginning of mine. Then drag the position's value to move your text to where you want the animation to start from. I'm going to move mine just off screen on the left side. Click the stopwatch next to position to create a starting keyframe. Next, move the time marker to where you want your text animation to finish moving by. Then change the position to where you want your text to move to. This will automatically create a second keyframe at the time marker's location. Okay, this works fine, but I also want my text to leave the frame after a set amount of time. To do that, I'm going to position my time marker to where I want my text to start leaving the frame. Then click the diamond between these two arrows to create a keyframe for the current position. Next, move your time marker to where you want your text to finish moving. Then change the position to where you want it to move to, which will automatically create a fourth keyframe. Okay, and there I have a simple text animation, but there's a lot we can do to make this look more professional. Drag to select your two middle keyframes. Right-click one of them, hover over Temporal Interpolation, and select Continuous Bezier. Now doing this will make things a little smoother, but let's make it look even better. Click this arrow next to position to expand its settings. Make sure your two middle keyframes are still selected so you can see their blue handles. Under your second keyframe, drag the left circular handle down and to the left to create a ramp like this. Then under your third keyframe, drag its right handle down and to the right to create a ramp for the ending part of the animation. Okay, and now when I play this back, my text moves in and out smoothly with some acceleration from my ramps. This looks good, but to make our text look even better, let's add some blur to it by going over to the Effects panel. Type Directional Blur in the search box. Then drag the effect onto your text clip on the timeline. Make sure your text clip is selected on the timeline and go back up to Effect Controls. If you're moving your text horizontally like me, under Directional Blur, change the direction to 90 degrees. If you're moving it vertically, 0 degrees works fine. Now move the time marker so that it's over your first keyframe for position. You can just use these little arrows by position to move the time marker from keyframe to keyframe if you find that easier. And I'm just going to minimize the source text stuff so that I can see my directional blur and position keyframes at the same time. Now click the stopwatch next to blur length to create a starting keyframe. Increase the blur length. I'm going to set mine to 30 so my text starts off blurry. Now let's move the time marker to where your position's second keyframe is. Change the blur length back to 0, which will automatically create a second keyframe so your text isn't blurry by the time it stops moving. And I'm also going to blur my text as it moves out of the frame by moving the time marker to my position's third keyframe. Then next to blur length, click this little diamond between the two arrows to create a keyframe for the blur's current value. And finally, I'll move the time marker to my position's fourth keyframe and change the blur length to 30 to create a fourth keyframe, which will make my text blurry as it moves off screen. Okay, this blur looks decent, but it'll look even better if we ramp the blur animation in the same way we did with the position. To do that, I'm going to drag to select my middle two keyframes for blur length. Then right-click one of them and select Continuous Bezier. Click the arrow next to blur length to see its handles and lines. Now drag your second keyframe's left handle down into the left to create a slope similar to the one you did for position. Keep in mind I'm dragging the handles for this top line, not the bottom one. Then select your third keyframe and drag the right handle down into the right so that it's similar to the position slope on the other side. Okay, and that's all there is to it. When I play this back, I have a smooth looking text animation with blur in Premiere Pro. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a background video to my timeline along with an image on the track above. Let's begin by selecting our image and going over to Effect Controls. Position the time marker to where you want your image to start coming in from off screen. I'm just going to put mine at the start of my clip. Then drag the position's first or second value until your image is off screen where you want it to come in. Click the stopwatch next to position to create a starting keyframe. Move the time marker to where you want your image to come back on screen. Drag that same position's value again until your image is back on screen to automatically create a second keyframe. Okay, now when I play this back, my image slides in from off screen, but it isn't very smooth. To smooth things out, drag to select both your keyframes in Effect Controls. Right-click one of them and hover over Temporal Interpolation. You can play around with any of these settings, but I find that ease in and ease out tend to look the best. And now when I play this back again, it looks a lot smoother. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline. Let's begin by going over to the graphics panel. To add a shape, click and hold on the pen tool to select either the rectangle or ellipse. Then just drag where you want your shape. This will create a new graphics clip for your shape on the timeline. To make your shape unfilled, just uncheck the fill over in the Essential Graphics panel, then check Stroke. You can increase the size of the stroke by dragging the number next to it. To change the color of your fill or stroke, just select the color box next to it. Now while this works great, if you prefer, you can do this in the Editing tab. Just be sure to click anywhere on the timeline to deselect the graphic so that when you draw a new shape, it'll create a new graphics clip for it. And to change its properties, you can just go over to the Effect Controls panel. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline along with some text that I'd like to track over this woman. Make sure your text clip's duration is long enough to cover what you want to track in your video. Okay, let's begin by using the text tool to select our text in the video preview. Move the cursor to the end of your text and press the Enter key on your keyboard. Then type an X on the next line, which we'll use to help center our text over the subject. Now drag to select all of your text in the preview and go over to Effect Controls. Open up your text settings. Click the Center Align button to center your text. Next, move the time marker to the start of your text clip. Now use the Selection tool to center the X on the object you'd like to track. I'm going to position my X over her face. Under Text and Effect Controls, scroll down to the Position property. Click the stopwatch next to Position to create a starting keyframe. Then move the time marker to the end of your text clip. In the video preview, move your X back over your subject, which will create an ending keyframe for the tracking animation. Okay, now move the time marker halfway between all your keyframes and recenter the X over your subject to create a middle keyframe. Then keep moving the time marker halfway between all your keyframes and recentering the X over your subject to create additional keyframes until your text is accurately tracking your subject. It looks like it's already tracked fine between the first and second keyframe, so I'm going to move it halfway between my middle and last keyframe. Now I'll just recenter the X over my subject to create an additional keyframe. While moving the text halfway between keyframes works well, as a finishing touch, I recommend scrubbing through your video and repositioning the X over any spots where it moves off your subject. Okay, once you're finished keyframing, use the text tool to delete the X from your video. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have smooth text tracking in Premiere Pro. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added some footage to my timeline, and since I have some cuts, I like to zoom in with an adjustment layer. Alright, let's begin by going over to the project panel and right-clicking anywhere in the empty space. Go to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Then drag your adjustment layer onto the timeline above where you want to zoom into your clips. And I'm just going to drag the end of my adjustment layer to increase its duration. Next, let's go over to the Effects panel and type Transform into the search box. Under Distort, drag the Transform effect onto your adjustment layer. Then make sure your adjustment layer is selected and go up to Effect Controls. In Effect Controls, scroll down to the Transform effect you just added. Position the time marker to where you want to start your zoom in the adjustment layer. I'm just going to put mine right at the start. Click the stopwatch toggle next to Scale to create a starting keyframe. And I'm also going to click the stopwatch next to Position to create a starting keyframe for my position. Move the time marker to where you want your clip to be zoomed in by. Increase the scale to your liking to create a second keyframe. Then change the position value so that your clip is zoomed in where you want it to be. This will also create a second keyframe for your position. Okay, and now my clip zooms in using my adjustment layer. To make your zoom go faster or slower, drag to select your second keyframe for position and scale. Drag them further away from your first keyframes to make the zoom go slower. Drag them closer to your first keyframes to make the zoom go faster. Now, if you want your zoom to be smoother, drag to select all your keyframes. Right-click one of them and hover over Temporal Interpolation. Select Ease In or Ease Out. Okay, that looks smoother. Now to zoom out, all you have to do is position the time marker to where you want to start zooming your footage back out. Click the little circle between the two arrows next to position to create a keyframe at the current position. Then click the little circle next to scale to create a keyframe at the current scale. Move the time marker to where you want your clip to be zoomed out by. Drag to select your first keyframe for position and scale. Then right-click one of the selected keyframes and select Copy. Finally, right-click anywhere in the empty space and select Paste to paste the keyframes at the time marker's location. Okay, and now when I play this back, my clip zooms in and then zooms out. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a clip to my timeline that I would like to zoom into by using a jump cut. Let's begin by positioning the time marker to where you want to zoom in with your jump cut. Then use the razor tool to make a cut at the time marker's position. Move the time marker to where you want your zoom jump cut to end. Make a cut at that position. Using the selection tool, select the middle part of your clip between the cuts you just made and go over to Effect Controls. And it's also a good idea to move your time marker over the middle of your clip so that you can see it as you edit it. In Effect Controls, increase the scale of the clip to your desired amount. And you also might want to adjust the position so that your zoom is centered where you'd like it. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a nice looking zoom jump cut in Premiere Pro. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline with a swan that I'd like to zoom in on while leaving the rest of the video alone. The best way to do this is by going over to the Effects panel. Type Magnify into the search box. Drag the magnifying effect onto your clip on the timeline. Make sure your clip is selected and go over to Magnify in Effect Controls. Under Magnify, you can set the shape to either a circle or a square. I'm going to stick with a circle. To change the center position of your shape, you can either click the center setting and drag around its anchor point in the video preview, or you can just drag the center's values in Effect Controls to change it manually. The magnification setting is going to affect how much it's zoomed in. I'm going to increase this to 200. The size setting will affect how big your shape is. And you can also increase the feather setting if you don't want your zoomed in shape to have sharp edges. Okay, the magnifying effect works great, but I'm going to undo this and show you the other way to do it. Go back over to the Effects panel and type Transform into the search box. Under Distort, drag the Transform effect onto your video clip on the timeline. Make sure your video clip is selected and then scroll down to the second Transform effect in Effect Controls. Under Transform, click the circle or square to create a mask around the object you'd like to zoom in on. And you can just drag the mask's handles to adjust its size, or drag the center of the mask to adjust its position. Now simply increase the scale to zoom into the part of your video covered by your mask. Lastly, you can also increase the mask's feather if you don't want the sharp edges of the mask's shape. Okay, and that's all there is to it. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Alright, to get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to zoom into. Let's begin by going over to the effects panel, and then type transform into the search box. Under distort, drag the transform effect onto your video clip. Then make sure your video clip is selected on the timeline and go up to effect controls. In here, under the transform effect, first let's uncheck use composition shutter angle to make our motion blur work. Then increase the shutter angle all the way up to 360 so you get the largest amount of motion blur. Okay, now let's position our playhead to where we want our zoom to start. Under the transform effect, click the stopwatch next to scale to create a starting keyframe. And if you want to zoom in on something off-center, click the stopwatch next to position to create a starting keyframe for that as well. Okay, now that we have our two starting keyframes, let's move the playhead to where we want our footage to be finished zooming in by. Notice how I want my zoom to end right after my first keyframe. This way, my zoom is fast, which will in turn make my motion blur stand out more. Now let's increase the scale to your desired zoom amount to create a second keyframe for scale. I recommend increasing it to at least 300% to get a really obvious motion blur. And I'll also change my positions value to zoom in on something I want. Okay, now when I play this back, I have a nice looking zoom effect with motion blur. To make my zoom look even smoother, I'm just going to drag to select all my keyframes. Then right click one of them, hover over temporal interpolation, and select ease in. Alright, now my zoom looks smoother and more professional. If you want to zoom your clip back out with motion blur, just position the playhead to where you want to start zooming back out. Click the little circles next to scale and position to create keyframes so Premiere knows when to start zooming out. Then move the playhead to where you want to be finished zooming out by. Finally, click this little curvy arrow next to position and scale. The curvy arrow button just creates keyframes that reset your video back to its original position and scale. Okay, and now when I play this back, my clip zooms in for a bit, and then zooms back out when it hits my second set of keyframes. Alright, that's all for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to blur the background in Premiere Pro. To begin, I just have a background clip that I'd like to blur. Let's start by going over to the effects panel. Type Gaussian blur into the search box. Drag the effect onto the clip you'd like to blur. Make sure your clip is selected and then go up to effect controls. Position the timehead to where you want your blur to start. Under Gaussian blur, click the stopwatch next to the blurriness property to create a starting keyframe. Its value should be set to 0. Then move the timehead a little bit forward. Increase the blurriness value to your liking to create your second keyframe. Be sure to check repeat edge pixels so that there isn't a black border around the clip. Alright, and now when we play this back, we have a nice looking blur effect. To go from your blur back to a clear video, move the timehead to where you want that to happen. Next to the blurriness property, click the circle button between the two arrows to create a third keyframe. Then move the timehead a little past its current location. Change the blurriness value to 0 to create an ending keyframe. And now the video goes from blurry back to clear. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video to my timeline with a Mega Man logo that I'd like to blur out. Let's begin by going over to the effects panel and typing Gaussian blur into the search box. Drag the effect onto your video clip on the timeline. Make sure your clip is selected and then go up to effect controls. Under Gaussian blur, click either the square or the circle depending on what shape you want your blurred area to be. This will create a new mask. Drag the center of the mask so that it's positioned over the object you like to blur. Then drag the handles so that the mask fits snugly around your object. Now back over in effect controls, increase the blurriness to your liking. Okay, this works great, but I don't really like how square my blur looks. To fix that, just increase the mask's feather. This looks much better, but let's say you want to blur a moving object like this enemy here. To keep things simple, I'm just going to delete and re-add my Gaussian blur effect to my video. Now my enemy here is circular, so I'm going to use a circular mask this time under Gaussian blur. Reposition and resize the mask so that it fits tightly around your moving object. Then next to mask path, click the play button to track your object and create keyframes for the animation. Once it's finished, just increase the blurriness and mask feather properties to your liking. Okay, now when I play this back, my moving object has been blurred. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline where I'd like to automatically track and blur my subject's face. Now I'm going to go over to the effects panel and add Gaussian blur to my clip, but keep in mind that automatic motion tracking will work the same for all effects that allow it. Over in Effect Controls, make sure your time marker is positioned where you want to start masking and then scroll down to the effect you added. Underneath it, click on one of these masking shapes. I'm blurring a face, so I'll just use the circle. Position your mask over your subject and use the handles to fit it properly. Then click the play button next to Mask Path to automatically track your subject. Okay, now that I have my mask following my subject, I'm just going to increase the blur amount to blur the mask. Now this looks quite good, but if you need to make manual adjustments, just stop the video where needed and move the mask around a little to adjust it. I'm also going to increase my mask feather a little bit so my mask looks less rigid. One last thing to keep in mind is that if you deselect the mask at any point and want to make adjustments later on, just reselect it here to show it in the playback window. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added 2 video clips to my timeline and I have them stacked on top of each other. Let's begin by selecting our top clip on the timeline and going over to Effect Controls. In here, drag the position's first value to move your top clip over to the right side. Okay, and there I have a simple split screen effect, but my subjects aren't really centered in the frames. To fix that, let's go over to the Effects panel and type crop into the search box. Drag the crop effect onto your top video clip. In Effect Controls, under crop, change the left or right values to crop out the part of the video you want. Then drag the position's first value to reposition your video in the frame. To change what's in the frame in your other clip, select your bottom video clip on the timeline, then go over to Effect Controls and change its position. Okay, and there I have a nice looking split screen effect. If you want to add a line between your split screen, select the pen tool from the toolbar. Click at the very top of where your videos are split, and then click at the very bottom to form a line. Now in Effect Controls under your shape, make sure you have both fill and stroke checked and set to the same color for your line. You can change the stroke's value to adjust the thickness of your line. And finally, I'll just use the selection tool to drag the end of my timeline's graphic so that my line matches my video clip's durations. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a sliding split screen effect. To get started, I just added a background video to my timeline and imported 2 clips for the split screen effect. Let's begin by dragging the first clip for our split screen onto the track above the background video. Make sure it's positioned to where you want the effect to start. Then drag the second video for your split screen onto the track above the one you just added. Next, go over to the Effects panel and type crop in the search box. Drag the effect onto both of the clips you want to use for the split screen. Select your top split screen clip and then go up to Effect Controls. Scroll down to where the crop effect is. Change the left and right values so that together they equal 50%. This way the clip will fill up half the screen. I'm going to use 25% for both left and right, but these numbers will probably be different for you based on what you want to crop. Just be sure that added together they equal 50. Once you're finished, go up to the position value under motion and drag the position's first value to the left to move the clip until it's barely touching the edge of the frame. Alright, we're done with this clip for now, so go back down to the timeline and click the eye toggle to hide it so that we can fully see the other clip. Select your other split screen clip and go up to Effect Controls. Once again, scroll down to the crop effect and change its left and right values to get the crop that you like while making sure that the two together equal 50%. When you're finished with adjustments, go up to position and drag its first value over to the right so that it's barely touching the right edge of the screen. Then re-click the eye toggle so that we can see both of the split screen clips again. Alright, now that we have our clips in place, let's add the animation. Let's start with the right clip since we already have it open in Effect Controls. Position the time head to the start of the clip. Click the stopwatch toggle next to position to create a starting keyframe. Drag the position's second value, its Y value, until the clip is just slightly off the bottom of the screen. Press the right arrow on your keyboard 15 times to move the time head 15 frames forward. Then drag the position's Y value until the clip is fully back on the screen, creating the second keyframe. Okay, this looks good. Now let's do the same thing with our other clip, but move it in the opposite direction. Select your other split screen clip on the timeline and go up to Effect Controls. Position the timehead at the start of the clip. Click the stopwatch toggle next to position to create a starting keyframe. Drag the position's Y value until the clip is slightly off screen but at the top this time. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 15 times to move the timehead forward 15 frames. Then drag the position's Y value until the clip is fully visible again in the frame. This will create your second keyframe. Alright, and now when I play this back, we have a nice looking sliding split screen effect. For our final touch, I'm just going to smooth out the animation a bit. To do this, click and drag to select both of your keyframes. Right-click them and go to Temporal Interpolation Ease In. Then select your other split screen clip and go up to Effect Controls and do the same thing by dragging to select both of your keyframes, right-clicking one of them, and going to Temporal Interpolation Ease In. And now when I play this back, it looks smoother and more professional. Alright, and that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a couple video clips to my timeline that I'd like to make look better with color grading. Let's begin by selecting our first clip and going over to the color panel up here. If you don't see it, just go to Window, Lumetri Color. In the Lumetri Color panel, open up the Basic Correction section. In Basic Correction, we'll mostly be playing around with these tones. The first thing you might want to change is the exposure, which controls how dark or light your video is. Mine is plenty bright, so I'm going to leave the setting alone. My video does look kind of flat though, so let's increase its contrast. The contrast is a scale of difference between black and white. Then I'm going to decrease the highlights, which will tone down the brightness of the brightest parts of my clip. I like how this makes my leaves colors pop more. Next, I'm going to decrease the shadows to darken up the darkest parts of my video since I like my dark foliage and water to stand out more. And I'll also decrease my blacks to make my water even darker since I really like its dark look. To really liven your video up, you can increase the saturation a bit. I think the saturated look brings out the colors in the shot, but it comes down to preference and the shot. Up here, I'll make my temperature more orange since it's a fall day and I want a warmer look. Okay, and there's my original video next to my new one, which looks much more lively. Alright, next up, I have the city landscape that looks kinda flat. First of all, I'm going to decrease the exposure since I think this scene is a little too bright. Then let's increase the contrast to bring out some color that this video is sorely missing. Next, I'll decrease the highlights since I think the brightest parts of this video are a bit too bright. And I'll also decrease the shadows to make the darkest parts of my video darker. I still think my whites are a tad too bright, so I'll lower those a bit. Then I'll decrease my blacks to make my building's black windows a little darker. It also might not hurt to up my saturation a tiny amount to make my browns and blues pop a little more. And since this looks like a dreary day, I'm going to make my temperature cooler. Okay, side by side, I really think this new video has more life to it. Alright, and that's how I color grade videos. I hope this guide gave you some insight as to what the different tones do and how to use them. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to add a filter to. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel. In here, you'll see a Lumetri Presets folder, so go ahead and open that up. Now there's 5 broad categories for filters. I'm going to start with the cinematic ones. When you select each filter, you'll get a little preview that's highlighted in gray on the side. To see how it looks on your footage, just click and drag the filter onto your clip on the timeline. If you don't like how it looks, just use the Ctrl-Z keyboard shortcut to undo adding it. Then just drag a new filter onto your clip to experiment with different looks. And of course, you should try out the other categories like monochrome for black and white. The speed looks filters are also good ones to try to get some pretty unique looks. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to make black and white. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel. Type white into the search box. Under Image Control, drag the black and white effect onto your video clip on the timeline. Okay, and now I have a simple black and white video. This works great, but let's say you want a black and white effect that has a little more contrast or a slightly different look. I'm going to just undo adding this black and white effect. Now go back over to the Effects panel and type monochrome into the search box. Under monochrome, you should see a bunch of different presets for a black and white effect. Select them individually to see a preview of how each will look. Once you find one you like, drag it onto your video on the timeline. Alright, and now I have a different black and white effect with more contrast. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to change the color of. Let's begin by creating a new adjustment layer by right-clicking on the project panel and going to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Then drag your adjustment layer above your video clip on the timeline. Next, go over to the Effects panel and type Tint into the search box. Drag the tint effect onto your adjustment layer on the timeline. Make sure your adjustment layer is selected and then go up to Effect Controls. If you only want to change your video to a single color, changing the Map White to will usually look the best. Reduce the amount of tint if you want a more subtle effect. If you want a different, lighter looking effect, change the Map White to back to white and change Matte Black to a different color. To create a multicolor blended tint, just change both colors. Now this looks good, but the reason I added the adjustment layer earlier is because it allows you to change the opacity's blend mode for your tint. This way you can create interesting blended color effects if that's what you're going for. Finally, if you want to animate your tint in and out, start by moving the time head to where you want to begin showing your tint. Click the stopwatch next to Amount to Tint to create a starting keyframe. Change the amount to tint to 0. Then move the time head to where you want your tint to be fully shown by. Increase the tint to the amount of your choice to create a second keyframe. Then move the time head to where you want your tint to be removed by and change the amount of tint back to 0 to create a third keyframe. Okay, and now my tint goes in and out. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a clip to my timeline where the whites look pinkish and off. To fix this, let's begin by selecting our clip and going over to the Color tab. Under White Balance, click the WB Selector Dropper tool. Then click the white area you'd like to fix. Okay, right away, this looks a lot better. If it still looks a little off, just reselect the dropper tool and select the area you'd like to correct. Alright, that looks much better. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video to my timeline that I'd like to overlay this green stock footage on top of. Let's begin by dragging the green screen footage from the project panel onto the track above our video on the timeline. Then go over to the Effects panel. Type Ultra into the search box. Drag the Ultra key effect onto your green screen video clip on the timeline. Make sure your green screen video is selected on the timeline and go over to Effect Controls. Under Ultra key, click the dropper next to Key Color. Click anywhere in the green space of your video preview to get rid of the green. Okay, and when I play this back, my green screen footage is overlaid nicely on my video. That's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to add diffused highlights to clips. To get started, I just added a clip to my timeline that I'd like to add diffused highlights to. Let's begin by holding down the Alt key on your keyboard and dragging the clip onto the track above to duplicate it. Next, let's head over to the Effects panel and type Luma key into the search box. Drag the Luma key effect onto your top clip. Over in Effect Controls, the threshold should already be set to 100%, but if it isn't, increase it to 100. Then, go back over to the Effects panel and type Camera Blur into the search box. Drag the effect onto your bottom clip, which will create this nice looking diffused highlights effect. In Effect Controls, under Camera Blur, you can change the blur amount based on how strong you want the effect to be. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip of a cat and a magnifying glass image to my timeline. To duplicate and make a copy of any clip on your timeline, just hold down the Alt key on your keyboard while clicking and dragging the clip. You can do this as many times as you want, and it works for any type of media. You can even drag to select a bunch of clips at once and then hold down the Alt key while dragging your selection to make copies of the entire selected group. Okay, and that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added 2 clips to my timeline so that I have some footage to work with. Let's begin by heading over to the project panel. Now, to insert a clip at the start of your timeline, hold down the Control key while dragging your clip to the very start of the timeline. Alright, that works, but I'm going to undo this to show you how to insert a clip in between 2 clips. To do this, hold down the Control key and drag your clip directly after the clip you want the new clip in front of. Okay, and that's all I have for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To begin, I added a couple clips to my timeline so that I have some footage to replace. Alright, let's start by going over to the project panel. While holding down the Alt key, drag the footage you'd like to use onto the timeline clip you'd like to replace. Now you'll notice that while this worked, Premiere didn't adjust the duration of our clip to fit the one we replaced it with. Since our original clip was longer than our replacement clip, we get some black video on the end represented by some diagonal lines on the clip. Unfortunately, there's no way to avoid this when you're inserting your new clip, so you'll have to do a quick manual adjustment. Simply hold down the Control key and position your cursor at the end of your clip. Your cursor should turn into a yellow bracket. Click and drag the end of your clip to adjust its duration so that it ends right before the diagonal lines. Now, if your old clip is shorter than the new clip you're inserting, you'll have to extend your clip's duration in the other direction to see all your footage. Okay, and that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added some clips to my timeline that I'd like to join together. There's a few different ways to do this, but let's start with the one you'll probably use the most, nesting. Alright, begin by dragging on the timeline to select the clips you'd like to join. You can also do this by holding down the Shift key and selecting each clip individually. Once you have your clip selected, right-click one of your selected clips and select Nest. Name your nested sequence if you'd like and hit OK. Alright, and there it joined my two clips together in one nested clip. Now you can add effects or whatever you want to the nested clip and it'll be applied to both of the clips you joined together. And you can change the effects properties as normal by selecting the clip and going over to Effect Controls. If you ever want to see the clips individually, just double-click your nested sequence to open up a new tab on the timeline that shows its contents. You can even apply effects to each clip individually within the nested sequence if you want to go that route. Think of nesting as a container that's just holding your clips inside of it, and you can either apply changes to the whole container or open it up and apply changes to each piece inside it. Once you're done messing around in the nested sequence, just click your timeline tab to go back to it. The next way to join clips is to select the clips you'd like to combine like before, right-click one of them, and select Make Subsequence. This works exactly the same as nesting, but it leaves your original clips on the timeline alone and instead creates a new subsequence over in the project panel that contains your combined clips. Just drag the subsequence onto the timeline and it'll behave the same as a nested sequence. Like before, you can double-click it to see the two clips that were combined inside the container. Okay, this works fine, but let's say you don't want to actually create a container and instead just want to group clips together so that you can move them around more easily on the timeline. To do this, select the clips you'd like to group, right-click one of them, and select Group. Now when I select one of my grouped clips, it'll select anything that it's grouped with. And when I move them, they move together. The downside to this, though, is if I apply an effect to my group clips, select a clip, and go to Effect Controls, it won't let me change the effect's properties because it's still treating them as two different clips. Alright, and those are the ways to join clips together in Premiere Pro. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just have a bunch of cutout audio clips on my timeline along with a pretty sizable gap in between the last two. Now to merge these all together and create a single audio track, I'm going to click and drag on my timeline to select them all. Then I'm going to right-click them and select Nest. Finally, to convert my nested sequence back into a single audio track, I'm going to right-click it and select Render and Replace. Alright, now I've merged all my cutout clips together into one audio track. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. The most straightforward way to move multiple clips around on your timeline is to use the Track Select Forward tool. With the tool selected, click on the first clip you want to move and all the following clips will be selected. Now just drag the clips to where you want to move them. Another way to move multiple clips together is by simply using the Selection tool and dragging in the empty space on your timeline to select your desired clips. Now just drag them to move them around. This works great, but let's say you only want to move the second and last clip. To do this, hold down the Shift key while clicking on each clip you'd like to move. Now just drag them to move your selected clips. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a couple clips to my timeline that I like to loop during my previews playback. Begin by clicking this little Add button under the video preview. Drag the Loop Playback button onto the toolbar under the video preview. Click it to turn looping on. Now whenever my timehead gets to the end of the last clip on my timeline, the video will loop and replay. But let's say you only want to loop part of your clips. To do this, position your timehead to where you want to start the loop. Click the Mark In button under the preview. Then move the timehead to where you want to end the loop. Click the Mark Out button. Alright, and now when I play this back, my clip will loop on my selection. You can also move clips around when this is happening if you want to experiment with adding something to the end of it. And finally, once you're done with your in and out points, right-click up here and select Clear In and Out. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To begin, I just added a video to my timeline to demonstrate how to rewind video while editing. Alright, let's start by positioning the timehead where we want to start rewinding from. Now just press the J key on your keyboard once to rewind the video. Press it again to speed up the rewinding. This trick also works in the source panel if you prefer to edit that way. Okay, and that's all for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To begin, I just added a video clip to my timeline to work with. Click anywhere inside the timeline panel or program panel. Now all you have to do to speed up the video is press the L key twice. To speed up your video even faster, continue pressing the L key. You can also slow the video down by pressing the J key. To bring your video back to regular speed, just pause it by using the space bar and then press it again to resume playback normally. Keep in mind that you can also speed up the video in the source preview pane by using the same keys. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to create cinematic titles in Premiere Pro. To get started, I'm just going to right-click in my project panel and then go to New Item, Black Video. Then I'll drag the black video onto my timeline and extend it to around 7 seconds. If you can't see the individual seconds like me, drag this bar down here to zoom into your timeline. Next, click the text tool and type out your desired text. And I'm just going to drag the text clip's duration so that it matches my black video. Make sure your text is selected and go over to Effect Controls. In here, I'm using the Lato font, which is available for free on the Adobe font site. I'm also going to set my font size to 90. Then change the tracking setting to 300 to create some spacing between your letters. To center the text, go over to the Graphics tab up here. Select Edit and then click these two alignment buttons to center your text horizontally and vertically. Position your time marker at the start of your text clip and go back up to Effect Controls. In Effect Controls, open up the opacity settings. Change the opacity to 0 to create a starting keyframe. Move your time marker to the 2-second mark and change the opacity to 100 to create a second keyframe. Move the time marker to the 4-second mark and click the circle to create a keyframe at the time marker's current position. Move the time marker to the 6-second mark and change the opacity to 0 to create a fourth keyframe. Okay, and now our text fades in and out, but let's make it look smoother. Drag to select all your keyframes and then right-click one of them and select Auto Bezier. Okay, now that looks smoother and more professional. Next, let's go up to the motion settings. Reposition the time marker at the start of your text clip. Click the stopwatch next to scale to create a starting keyframe. Move the time marker to your last keyframe's position and increase it to 110. Now our text looks like it's growing slightly. For one final touch, I'm going to go down to the Effects panel and search for Gaussian Blur. Drag Gaussian Blur onto your text layer. Make sure your text layer is selected and then go back up to Effect Controls. Position your time marker at the start of your text clip. Under Gaussian Blur, click the stopwatch next to Blurriness and change the blurriness to 50 to create a starting keyframe. Move the time marker to the 2-second mark and change the blurriness back to 0. Then move the time marker to the 4-second mark and click this little circle next to blurriness to create another keyframe at 0 blurriness. Move the time marker to the 6-second mark and change the blurriness back to 50. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have nice looking cinematic text that blurs in and out in Premiere Pro. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create an easy text reveal effect. To get started, I just added some text to my timeline. Let's begin by using the selection tool to move our text a little below where we want it to be revealed. Once it's in place, go over to the Effects panel. Type crop into the search box. Drag the crop effect onto your text track on the timeline. Up in Effect Controls for your text, scroll down to the crop effect you just added. Increase the bottom's value so that the crop is barely hiding your text. Next, click the drop-down arrow next to Transform under your text. Position your timehead to where you want the text revealed to start at. Click the stopwatch next to Position to create a starting keyframe. Move the timehead to where you want the text to be revealed by. Then decrease the position's Y value until you can see your text. This will create an ending keyframe for the animation. Okay, and there we have our text reveal effect. If you want it to look a little smoother, click and drag to select your two keyframes. Right-click one of them and go to Temporal Interpolation Ease In. Alright, and there you have it. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a text reveal effect in Premiere. Alright, to begin, let's add a solid color background by right-clicking in the project panel and going to New Item Color Matte. Select the color of your choice and hit OK. Drag the color matte from your project bin onto your timeline. Now let's type our text. Select the Type tool and type your text in the Program panel. Next, we need to add our line. Go to File, New, Legacy Title, or use the Ctrl-T keyboard shortcut. In the Title Designer, select the Line tool. While holding down the Shift key, click and drag to create a straight line above your text. Make sure that your line is longer than your text. It's also a smart idea to increase a line's width because it'll make the next steps easier. Once you're satisfied with your line, drag it so that it's touching the top of your text. Okay, we're done in here, so close out of the Title Designer. Drag the title you just created onto the track above your text on the timeline. Now let's go over to the Effects panel and type Crop into the search box. Drag the effect onto your text clip. Up in Effect Controls for the text clip, scroll down to the Crop effect. Increase the bottom's value so that the crop runs right up to your line, completely covering the text. Click the stopwatch button to create a starting keyframe. Move the time head to where you want the text reveal animation to end. Select the crop effect so that you can see the crop's bounds. Drag the crop's bottom handle to reveal the text, creating your second keyframe. Okay, now that we have our text being revealed, we just need to animate our line to sync up with the crop's animation. Click the bottom properties left arrow to move the time head to the crop's first keyframe. Select your title on the timeline. In Effect Controls for the title, click the stopwatch toggle next to position to create the starting keyframe. Reselect your text clip on the timeline and scroll down to the crop effect. Click the bottom properties right arrow to move the time head to your second keyframe. Select your title again. Now in Effect Controls, our time head is positioned exactly where the crop ends, which is where we want our line to end too. Decrease the position's Y value until your line is just under the text. Alright, and now when I play this back, we have a nice looking text reveal effect. Keep in mind that you can do this reveal from the bottom to the top or from the sides instead, you just need to change which direction you're animating your crop in. Okay, and that's all for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add motion blur to images and text. To get started, I just added some text to my timeline. Let's begin by heading over to the Effects panel. Type Transform into the search box and then drag it onto your text or image. Up in Effect Controls, scroll down to the Transform effect. Now I'm just going to create a simple rotation animation using the Transform effect I just added to my text. It's super important that you create your animation using the Transform effect and not by using the motion or text transform properties, or the effect won't work. Once you're finished adding your animation, uncheck the Use Compositions Shutter Angle checkbox. Then increase the shutter angle's value to your liking to create the motion blur. Alright, and now we have a really easy motion blur. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a blur to focus text effect in Premiere. To begin, I just added a video with some text to my timeline. Alright, let's start by heading over to the Effects panel and typing Gaussian blur into the search box. Drag the effect onto your text layer. Now go up to Effect Controls for the text layer. In here, we're going to start by adjusting the text opacity so that our text fades in. Move the time head to the start of the clip. Make sure the opacity stopwatch button is turned on and then change the opacity's value to 0 to create a starting keyframe. Drag the time head a little past its current position and change the opacity to 100 to create the ending keyframe. Okay, now that we have our fade, let's add the blur. Scroll down to the Gaussian blur effect that you added earlier. Move the time head to the start of your clip. Change the blurriness to 100 and click the stopwatch toggle to create your starting keyframe. Since we want our text to come out of the blur and into focus right when it's finished fading in, we're going to want the time head at the location of our opacity's ending keyframe. Go up to the opacity property and click the right arrow next to the blue keyframe button to move the time head to the opacity's second keyframe. Now when we scroll back down to the blurriness property, the time head is positioned in the right place. Change the blurriness's value to 0 to create your ending keyframe. Alright, and now when I play this back, we have a nice text blurred to focus effect in Premiere. Okay, that's all for me. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do this text stretching effect. To get started, I just added a background video to my timeline. Let's begin by selecting the type tool and adding some text to the video. Then select the Move tool. Drag the little circle which represents the anchor point to the lowest point of your text. So for me, it'll be right under the G. This is where we want the stretching animation to start from. Now over in Effect Controls, scroll down to the Transform properties for your text. Uncheck the Uniform Scale checkbox. Position the time head at the start of your text clip. Then change the vertical scale to 0. Click the stopwatch toggle next to vertical scale to create your first keyframe. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 12 times to move the time head forward 12 frames. Change the vertical scale to 120 to create your second keyframe. Press the right arrow key another 5 times to move the time head forward 5 frames. Change the vertical scale to 95 to create your third keyframe. Press the right arrow key 5 more times to move the time head forward 5 more frames. Change the vertical scale to 100 to create your last keyframe. Alright, and now when I play this back, we have a nice looking stretching text effect in Premiere. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a background video along with some text to my timeline that I'd like to make flicker. Let's begin by selecting our text and going over to Effect Controls. Position the time head to where you want your text to start flickering. I'm just going to position mine at the start of my clip. Click the little circle next to opacity to create a starting keyframe. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard once to move the time head forward 1 frame. Change the opacity to 0 to create a second keyframe. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard to move the time head forward another frame. Change the opacity to 100 to create a third keyframe. Press the right arrow key again and change the opacity to 0 to create a fourth keyframe. Okay, and now when I play this back, my text flickers twice. Now to easily make it flicker more times, drag to select all 4 of your keyframes. Right-click them and select Copy. Position the time head at your last keyframe and press the right arrow key on your keyboard to move the time head forward 1 frame. Then right-click and select Paste. Okay, now our text flickers more times. Keep positioning the time head 1 frame ahead of your last keyframe and copying and pasting your keyframes until your text flickers long enough for you. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make text pop in and out in Premiere Pro. To get started, I just added some text to my timeline on the track above some background footage. Let's begin by selecting the text clip on the timeline and going over to Effect Controls. In here, make sure your time marker is positioned at the start of your text clip. Then go over to where your text is in Effect Controls and open up its settings. Scroll down to the transform setting for your text and change the scale to 0. Then click the stopwatch next to scale to create a starting keyframe. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 5 times to move the time marker forward 5 frames. Change the scale to 125 to create a second keyframe. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 4 more times to move the time marker forward 4 frames. Change the scale to 95 to create a third keyframe. Now press the right arrow key on your keyboard 3 more times to move the time marker forward 3 frames. Change the scale back to 100 to create a fourth keyframe. Okay, and now when I play this back, my text pops in. To pop it out, move the time marker to where you want your text to pop out. Click the little circle between the 2 arrows to create a keyframe for the scale's current value. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 3 times to move the time marker forward 3 frames. Change the scale to 95 to create a 6th keyframe. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 4 more times to move the time marker forward 4 frames. Change the scale to 125 to create a 7th keyframe. Finally, press the right arrow key on your keyboard 5 more times to move the time marker forward 5 frames. Change the scale to 0 to create an 8th and final keyframe. Okay, now when I play this back, my text pops in and then pops back out when it hits my second set of keyframes. Now this looks pretty good, but let's smooth the animation a bit by dragging to select our first 3 keyframes. Right-click one of the selected keyframes and select Bezier. Then drag to select your last 3 keyframes. Right-click one of them and select Bezier. Notice how I left the 4th and 5th keyframe alone because I want the text to remain still and not animate on a curve between my text popping in and out. Okay, and now when I play this back, my text smoothly pops in and out. One thing you might notice is your text popping in from the corner and not the center. To fix this, go down here and select your selection tool and then select your text. You should see a little circle in one of the corners representing the anchor point, which controls where your text pops in from. If you don't see the anchor point, go back over to Effect Controls and make sure your text is selected. Now simply drag the anchor point to the center of your text. Alright, and now my text pops in and out nicely from the center. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to create a flashing color text effect like this. The first thing I'm going to do is right-click in my project panel and go to New Item Black Video. Keep in mind that you can do this effect over regular video too. Next, drag your video onto your timeline. I also have an audio clip here that I'm going to add as well. Select the Type tool and type your text onto your video. Make sure your text is selected and then go into Effect Controls. Change the text fill color to something other than black or white. I'm going to use red. It's important that you do this or the effect won't work. Next, let's head over to the Effects panel. Type Color Balance into the search box. Drag the effect called Color Balance HLS onto your track. Make sure it's the one with the HLS next to it. Go back up to Effect Controls for your text clip and scroll down to your Color Balance effect. Position the time head to the start of your clip. Then click the timer next to the hue property to create the first keyframe. Move the time head to the end of your clip and then increase the hue to automatically create your second keyframe. The more you increase your hue, the faster the flashing colors will be. And now when I play this back, we have a nice looking flashing color effect in Premiere. While I did this with text for this video, keep in mind that this effect will work for anything with a color. Okay, and that's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to animate text like you see in this Chili's commercial. To begin, I just added a colored background to my timeline as well as some text. Let's start by selecting our text layer on the timeline and heading up to Effect Controls. Position the time head at the start of your text clip. Use the Type tool to select your text and then change the text size to 100. Then put 3 spaces between each letter using the Type tool. Click the stopwatch toggle next to source text to create a starting keyframe. Since my sequence is at 60 frames per second, I'm going to press my right arrow key twice to move the time head 2 frames to the right. If your sequence is at 30 FPS, just move the time head 1 frame to the right. Select your text with the Type tool and increase the font size to 150. Delete 1 space between each character so that there's 2 spaces between them. Making these changes will create a second keyframe. Select your text in Effect Controls and press the right arrow key twice to move the time head forward another 2 frames. Again, if you're working with a 30 FPS sequence, just move forward 1 frame. Select your text and increase the font size to 300. Using the Type tool, get rid of all the spaces between your letters. Doing this will create your final keyframe. Now when I play this back, we have the animation that you see in the commercial. Keep in mind that you don't have to use my exact values to do this. What's important is that you understand the process of adding and removing spaces and changing the size of the text. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create the zoom text effect. To get started, I just added a color map background to my timeline and added some text onto the track above. Let's begin by selecting our text clip and going over to Effect Controls. Position the time marker at the start of your text clip. Increase the scale's value so that it's super zoomed into your text. I'm going to set mine to 500. Then click the stopwatch next to scale to create a starting keyframe. Move the time marker to where you want your text to be zoomed in by. Change the scale back to 100 to automatically create your second keyframe. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a nice and simple looking zoom text effect. To make it look smoother, click and drag to select both your keyframes. Then right click them and select Ease Out. One last thing you can do to make it look even better is go over to the Effects panel and type Directional Blur in the search box. Drag that effect onto your text clip on the timeline. Then in Effect Controls, position the time marker to the beginning of your text clip. Change the blur length so that your text looks slightly blurred. I'm going to set mine to 15. Click the stopwatch next to blur length to create a starting keyframe. Go up to scale and click this little arrow to position the time marker at your scale's second keyframe. Go back down to blur length and change it to 0 to create a second keyframe. Now our blur will end exactly when our zoom does. Alright, and now when I play this back, we have a nice looking zoom text effect. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. For initial setup, I just added a title and a video to my timeline. Alright, to begin, let's head over to the effects pane. Type turbulent displace into the search box. Then drag the effect onto your title clip. Next, make sure your title is selected and then go to the effect controls. Now the first option you might want to tinker with is the displacement. This changes the style of your wiggle. The other options are cool, but I'm just going to stick with the turbulent. Next up is the amount of distortion we want. I'm going to lower mine to around 30 for a more subtle wiggle. I'm also going to lower the size to about 30 because we want the size of our wiggling waves to be small. Alright, now we have all of our basic properties we need set up, so let's add the actual animation. To do this, position your time head to the start of your clip. Then click the stopwatch next to offset turbulence to create a keyframe. Drag your time head to the end of your clip and then increase both of these values based on how quickly you want your wiggle to go, which will automatically create your second keyframe. For these two values, a good rule of thumb is to have your first value to be double your second value. Alright, now when I play this back, we have a nice looking wiggle effect. And there you have it. I hope you found this tutorial useful. To get started, I just added some text to my timeline. Let's begin by holding down the Alt key and dragging our text up to duplicate it. Now let's go over to the Effects panel and search for Wave Warp in the search box. Drag the effect onto your top text clip. Over in Effect Controls, go down to the Wave Warp effect you just added. Change the wave type to square. Increase the wave height to around 50. Then increase the wave width to 100. Change the direction to 0 so that it glitches horizontally. After that, decrease the wave speed to -10. Make sure the time head is at the start of your text clips and press a right arrow key on your keyboard 3 times to move the time head forward 3 frames. Now cut the top clip at the time head's position. Move the time head forward 4 more frames and make another cut. Delete the clip that you just cut out. Then drag the bottom clip so that it isn't overlapping with the first part of your top clip. Okay, now we have a horizontal glitch and then a slight pause. Alright, let's select the next part of our top clip and change the wave warp's direction to 90 so that it glitches vertically. Then position the time head where we left off on our top clip. Move the time head forward 3 frames and make a cut. Move the time head forward 4 more frames and make another cut. Delete the clip you just cut out. Then make a couple cuts down here to delete where your clips are overlapping on the bottom. After that, make another cut where our 2 big clips overlap. Then drag to select the 2 end clips and delete them. Now drag to select all your cutout clips. While holding down the Alt key, drag them to create duplicates. Alright, and now when we play this back, our text glitches. One last thing you can do to enhance your glitch effect and make it feel more random is to select some of your glitching clips and change their scale. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added some text above a video clip on my timeline. Let's begin by positioning the time head to the start of your text clip on the timeline. Then hold down the Shift key on your keyboard while pressing the right arrow key 3 times to move the time head forward 15 frames. Make a cut at the time head's position. Next, let's go over to the Effects panel and type Mosaic into the search box. Drag the effect onto the first part of your cutout text clip. Then make sure that text clip is selected and go over to Effect Controls. Position the time head at the start of the text clip. Then click the stopwatch toggles next to horizontal block and vertical block to create starting keyframes. Now move the time head to the end of your clip. Change the horizontal block's vertical and horizontal values to 125. Okay, this looks good, but let's add an RGB split effect by going to the Effects panel and searching for Chromatic Aberration. Drag the VR Chromatic Aberrations effect onto your pixelated text clip. Then go up to Effect Controls for that clip, and under Opacity, change the blend mode to screen to get rid of that black background. Okay, now when I play this back, I have a nice looking futuristic text effect. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video to my timeline. Let's begin by using the text tool to add some text to our video. And I'm just going to increase its scale a bit in Effect Controls. Now let's go over to the Effects panel. Type Track Matte into the search box. Then drag your Track Matte key effect onto your video clip on the timeline, not the text clip. Make sure your video clip is selected on the timeline and go up to Effect Controls. Under Track Matte key, change the matte to the video track your text layer is on. In my case, it's right above on video 2. Okay, and there I can see my video through my text. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a split text animation effect in Premiere. To begin, I just added a video track with a text layer to my timeline. Let's begin by duplicating the text layer. To do this, hold down the Alt key and drag the text layer up onto the track above. Then move the duplicate off the original so that you can see both of them. Change the fill color of your duplicate so that we can tell them apart. Next, let's add a line to our project by going to File, New, Legacy Title, or by using the Ctrl-T keyboard shortcut. In the Title Designer, select the Line tool. While holding down the Shift key, click and drag to draw a straight line through the middle of your original text layer. Make your line even on both sides and longer than your text so that you have room for the animation. It's also a good idea to increase your line width because a thicker line will make the next steps easier. Before we continue, make sure your line is exactly in the middle of your text, so move it if you need to. Once you're finished, close out of the Title Designer. Drag your new title from the project bin above the two text tracks on the timeline. Select the text with the line through it and head over to Effect Controls. Under the text setting, click on the rectangle to create a mask for the text. Drag the mask's handle so that you can only see the bottom half of the text under the line. Once it looks like this, select your duplicated text layer. Reposition it so that it's completely overlapping your other title. Then go to Effect Controls and click the rectangle under the text setting to create a mask for the top half. Drag the handle so that you can only see the top half of your duplicated text above the line. Alright, now we're ready to add the animation. Make sure your duplicated text layer is selected and then go to Effect Controls. Position the time head to where you want the animation to start. Click the stopwatch next to position to create your starting keyframe. Move the time head to where you want the animation to end and increase the position property's first value to create the ending keyframe. Then click the left arrow to move the time head to the first keyframe so that the time head's position is set up for the next animation. Now select your bottom text layer on the timeline. In Effect Controls, click the stopwatch next to position to create a starting keyframe. Move the time head to where the top half's animation ends. Decrease the position property's first value to create your ending keyframe. And now when I play this back, we have a cool looking split text animation effect. Alright, and that's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make highlighted comments or any other popped out text look clean and professional. To begin, I added a video clip to my timeline along with an image of my comment to the V3 track. We're going to be sandwiching an adjustment layer between the video clip and our comment, so make sure you have an empty track here. So the first thing we need to do is quickly blur our footage before displaying the comment. Right-click in the project panel and go to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Drag it a little past the start of your footage. Now head over to the Effects panel and type Gaussian Blur into the search box. Drag the effect onto your adjustment layer. Up in Effect Controls for the adjustment layer, make sure the time head is positioned at the start of the clip. Then click on the stopwatch next to the blurriness property to create a starting keyframe. Move the time head a tad to the right and then increase the blurriness to 100 to create your ending keyframe. Also be sure to check Repeat Edge Pixels to get rid of the black border around the blur. Okay, now that we have our blur transition in place, let's move on to the comment. Reposition your comment to start right after the footage is completely blurred. Then head over to the Effects panel. Type drop shadow into the search box. Then drag it onto your comment on the timeline. Back up in effect controls, we're going to adjust a few properties for our comment's drop shadow. These adjustments might be slightly different for you, but here's how I did mine. Set the opacity to around 85% to darken the shadow. Change the distance to 12. And lastly, I'm going to set the softness to 17. Alright, this is looking pretty good, but for a finishing touch, let's give this a little more life by very slowly zooming into our comment. To do this, let's head over to the project panel. Drag another adjustment layer onto the track above your comment. You can just use the one that's already in the project bin from before. Adjust its duration so that it matches the length of your comment. Then go to the Effects panel and type Transform into the search box. Drag the effect onto your adjustment layer. Up in Effect Controls for the new adjustment layer, navigate to the Transform effect you just added. Position the time head at the start of the adjustment layer. Click the stopwatch toggle next to Scale to create a starting keyframe. Drag the time head to the end of the adjustment layer and increase its scale a small amount to create the ending keyframe. We want the zoom to be super slow and gradual so that it gives our video a slightly animated feel rather than a jarring zoom. Okay, and now when I play this back, we have a nice looking highlighted comment in Premiere. Alright guys, that's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an animated callout box in Premiere. To get started, I just added a background video to my timeline so I have something to put my callout box on top of. Let's begin by positioning the time head to where you want the callout box to start showing. Make sure you don't have any clips selected by clicking anywhere in the empty space on your timeline. Then go up to Graphics, New Layer, Rectangle. Drag the rectangle over to the corner of your screen and use one of the corner handles to increase its size. Over in Effect Controls for a new rectangle, scroll down until you see the shape's appearance properties. I'm going to add a shadow to give it a little more style. Drag the distance slider so that you can see it better, and make sure the rest of your shadow's values are roughly the same as mine. Click the color picker box next to shadow and select a white color. Okay, this looks pretty nice, so let's move on and add some text. Click anywhere in the empty area on your timeline to deselect your rectangle graphic. Then select the Type tool. Click somewhere outside your rectangle in the video preview to create a new text graphic. Now just type the text you want for your callout box. Once you're finished typing, use the selection tool to drag it on top of your graphic. Click and drag on your timeline to select both your rectangle and your text graphic. Right-click them and select Nest. Now that they're nested, we can animate both of them together as one object. Select your nested sequence and go up to Effect Controls. Click on the motion properties so that you can see the anchor point in the preview. Drag it over to the upper left corner of your graphic. This way, Premiere knows that we want to start our animation from this point, making it look like our rectangle graphic is slowly expanding from this corner. Now make sure your time head is positioned at the start of the sequence. Click on the stopwatch toggle next to Scale to create a starting keyframe. Then change the scale's value to 0. Move the time head a little bit forward and change the scale's value to 100 to create a second keyframe. Okay, this animation looks good, but you're probably going to want to animate it going off screen too. Move the time head to where you want the callout box to go off screen. Click on the hollow circle between the two keyframe arrows to create a third keyframe. Move the time head a little further down. Change the scale's value to 0 to create an ending keyframe. Alright, and now when I play this back, the callout box animates off screen. For a final touch, let's smooth out the animation a little. Click and drag to select your first two keyframes. Right-click one of them and select Ease Out. Then drag to select your last two keyframes. Right-click one of them and select Ease In. And now when I play this back, it looks smoother. Alright, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a clip to my timeline that I'd like to make black and white except these berries. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel and typing Leave Color into the search box. Drag the Leave Color effect onto your clip on the timeline. Make sure your clip is selected and then go up to Effect Controls. Under Leave Color, change the amount to decolor to 100%. Then click the dropper next to Color to Leave. Using the dropper, select the color in your video preview you'd like to isolate. Try to pick a midtone of your color that's not too bright or too dark of a shade. Now, if yours doesn't look very good like mine, the first thing you can try is to change the match color setting to using hue. Okay, this worked really well for me, but if you're still having problems separating your color, try to lower the tolerance until you get your color isolated. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do this RGB split effect in Premiere Pro. To get started, I just added a video to my timeline that I'd like to add my effect to. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel and typing RGB into the search box. Drag the color balance RGB effect onto your clip on the timeline. Then make sure your clip is selected and go over to Effect Controls. Under Opacity, change the blend mode to Screen. Now, while holding down the Alt key on your keyboard, drag your clip up onto the track above to make a duplicate. Then do the same thing to make one more duplicate for the track above. Next, make sure your middle clip is selected. While holding down the Alt key, press a right arrow key on your keyboard twice to move the clip forward 2 frames, offsetting it. Then select your top clip and hold down the Alt key while pressing the right arrow key 4 times to move it forward 4 frames. Position your time head at the start of your top clip and cut off the beginning of your bottom 2 clips at the time head's position. Then select the cutout parts and hold down the Shift key on your keyboard while pressing Delete to get rid of them. And I'm also going to cut and get rid of the end parts of my top clips that are hanging out. Alright, now that our clips are even at the start and end, select your bottom clip. In Effect Controls, under Color Balance RGB, change the green and red values to 0. Then select your middle clip and change the red and blue values to 0. And lastly, select your top clip and change the green and blue values to 0. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a cool looking RGB split effect. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a couple clips to my timeline that I'd like to mess with the colors in. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel and typing Invert into the search box. Then drag the effect onto your desired clips. Make sure your clip with the effect is selected and go over to Effect Controls. Under Invert, change the channel to either in-phase chrominance or quadrature chrominance. I think quadrature looks great for this shot because it turns all the foliage purple. For my second clip, I'm going to change the channel to in-phase chrominance to make the people look kind of alien and blue like I've seen before in music videos. I also like how the quadrature channel looks on this clip, giving these women yellow lips and hair. Okay, and that's it for this simple color effect. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline to add the flashing color effect too. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel. Type Color Balance into the search box. Drag the one with the HLS onto your clip. Make sure your clip is selected and then go up to Effect Controls. Position the time head at the start of your clip. Go down to the Color Balance effect and click the stopwatch next to Hue to create a starting keyframe. Move the time head to where you want the flashing color effect to end. Click and drag the hue value to the right to increase its value. This will automatically create your second keyframe. Alright, and there we have our flashing color effect. If you want the flashing colors to go faster, start by using one of the arrows on the hue property to reposition the time head on the second keyframe. Now just increase the hue's value for your second keyframe to speed up the flashing colors. You can also slow down the flashing colors by simply decreasing the value for your second keyframe. Okay, and that's all for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an easy animated pop-up effect. To begin, I just added a video clip and an image to my timeline. Let's start by selecting our image on the timeline and going up to Effect Controls. Position the time head at the start of your image. Then change the scale's value to 0. Click the stopwatch toggle next to scale to create a starting keyframe. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 5 times to move the time head 5 frames to the right. Then change the scale to 120 to create the second keyframe. Press the right arrow key 3 times to move the time head another 3 frames to the right. Change the value to 95 to create your third keyframe. Press the right arrow key 3 more times and change the scale's value to 100 to create the last keyframe. And now when I play this back, we have a nice looking pop effect. If you want to make it a little smoother, click and drag to select all of your keyframes and then right click one of them. Select Continuous Bezier. Alright, I think that looks a little better. Keep in mind that you can play around with the amount of space between keyframes to speed up or slow down the effect. The main thing you want to take away here is how I made the animation by increasing the scale, decreasing it, and then slightly increasing it again to give it a bounce. Now if you want to pop your text back in, you would just do the same keyframed animation but in reverse. Move the time head to where you want to pop back in your text. Click the little circle between the two keyframe arrows to create a keyframe for the current scale. Press the right arrow key 3 times to move the time head 3 frames to the right. Change the scale's value to 95. Press the right arrow key another 3 times and change the scale to 120. Press the right arrow key 3 more times and then change the scale to 0. And now we have our text popping in and then back out. Alright, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to add a screen pump effect to. Let's begin by positioning the playhead to where you want to start the screen pump effect. Then make sure your clip is selected on the timeline and go up to Effect Controls. Click the stopwatch next to Position and Scale to create a starting keyframe. Then press the right arrow key on your keyboard 3 times to move the playhead forward 3 frames. Change Position's first value to 820. And change Position's second value to 440 to automatically create a second keyframe for Position. Then increase the scale to 120 to create a second keyframe for Scale. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 3 times to move the playhead forward another 3 frames. Click the Reset Parameter button for Position and Scale to create third keyframes at your clip's original position and scale. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a nice looking screen pump. To speed up the screen pump, just drag the first and third set of keyframes closer to the middle set. Finally, if you want to do a double screen pump, start by copying the first 2 sets of keyframes. Then position the playhead at the first set of keyframes. Press the left arrow key on your keyboard 6 times to move the playhead 6 frames back. Then paste the first 2 sets of keyframes at that position. Alright, and there I have a double screen pump. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I like to make stutter at a certain point. Start by positioning the time marker to where you want to stutter your video. Then make a cut at the time marker's position. Press the right arrow key on your keyboard 2 times to move the time marker forward 2 frames. Then make another cut at the time marker's position. And I'm just going to move the rest of this footage out of the way. While holding down the Alt key, drag your cutout clip to make a duplicate and place it right after your clip. Then drag to select both clips and hold down the Alt key while dragging to duplicate both of them. Keep making duplicates of all your cutout clips until your video stutters for your desired duration. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a nice looking stutter effect. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To start things off, I just added a video clip and an audio track to my timeline. Begin by selecting your clip and going up to Effect Controls. Under Motion, change the scale to 50. Back on the timeline, we need to make 3 more copies of our clip. To do this, hold down the Alt key and drag your clip onto the track above it to make a copy. Repeat doing this until you have a total of 4 clips. Don't worry if you can't see all your clips right away, they're just stacked on top of each other. Next, go to the Effects panel and type Flip in the search box. Drag the horizontal flip effect onto your topmost clip. Then drag the vertical flip onto the next clip down. Drag both horizontal flip and vertical flip onto your next clip. And just leave the bottommost clip the way it is without any effect. Alright, now to arrange our clips, double click your video to select your top clip. Then drag it into the bottom left corner. If you're having trouble lining things up, remember that you can use the arrow keys to move them a little at a time. Move your next clip into the top right corner. For the next one, move it to the upper left corner. And put your last clip in the bottom right corner. Now when I play this back, we have a nice looking kaleidoscope effect in Premiere. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this old film effect in Premiere Pro. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to add my effect to. Let's begin by right-clicking in the project panel and selecting New Item Adjustment Layer. Drag the adjustment layer above your video so that you have two empty tracks between it and your video. Now let's go over to the effects panel. Type Wave Warp into the search box and drag the effect onto the adjustment layer. Then search for noise and drag that effect onto your adjustment layer. Next, search for Gaussian blur and drag it onto your adjustment layer. Finally, search for crop and drag that effect onto your adjustment layer as well. Now that we have our effects, make sure your adjustment layer is selected on your timeline and go up to Effect Controls. Go down to Wave Warp and change the wave type to square. Change the wave width to 700. Change the direction to 0. Then change the wave speed to 0.1. And lastly, change the pinning to all edges. Okay, now we have a glitchy looking line that runs up our video. Now let's go down to Noise and Effect Controls and change the amount of noise to 40% to make our video look grainy. Then go down to the Gaussian blur effect and change the blurriness to 5, which will make our video look less HD. And for the crop effect, change the left and right properties to 10% so that it has a non-HD aspect ratio. Okay, this is looking good, but to make this look even cooler, let's add an RGB offset effect to our video. To do this, hold down the Alt key on your keyboard while dragging your video onto the track above it on the timeline to duplicate it. Then make one more duplicate for the track above. Now that we have 3 copies of our video, let's go over to the effects panel. Type RGB into the search box. Drag the color balance RGB effect onto each one of your 3 videos. Then select your bottom video and go up to Effect Controls. Under color balance, change the blue value to 100. Change the green and red values to 0. We're done with this clip, so select the next one up on the timeline. In Effect Controls, change the opacity's blend mode to screen. Then set the green's value to 100. Change the red and blue values to 0. Finally, select your top video under your adjustment layer. Change the opacity's mode to screen in Effect Controls. Under the color balance effect, set the red value to 100. Change the green and blue values to 0. Then go up to scale for this clip and increase it to 102 to offset your top video, creating this cool looking RGB effect. Alright, and there we have our old film effect in Premiere. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To start things off, I just added a clip to my timeline that I would like to add my vintage effect to. Let's begin by heading over to the effects panel. Type Lumetri Color into the search box. Then drag the effect onto your clip. Now go up to Effect Controls where you should see the Lumetri Color effect. Expand Basic Correction. Before we start adjusting properties in here, try to keep in mind that you don't need to worry about my exact value since your footage might need different adjustments. Instead, pay attention to the properties I change and the direction I'm changing them in. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is increase the temperature of my footage to about 50 to give it a warmer look. Then I'm going to change the exposure to -0.5 to make it a tad darker. Next, increase the contrast. I'm setting mine to 40. You also want to increase the highlights. I'm going to set this to 40 as well. Then lower your shadows. I'll put mine at -80. And let's also lower the saturation to give it more of a washed out look. 75 looks about right to me. Next, expand the creative section. Increase the faded film property to your liking. I'll set mine to 65. Alright, and now as you can see, we have a nice looking vintage effect in Premiere. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to add my glow effect to. Let's begin by holding down the Alt key on your keyboard and dragging your clip up onto the track above to create a duplicate. If you're using a Mac, hold down the Option key while dragging instead. And I'm just going to click the eye toggle next to the bottom clip to hide it for now so you can see what we're about to change. Now let's go over to the effects panel and type Luma key in the search box. Drag the Luma key effect onto your top clip. Make sure your top clip is selected on your timeline and go over to Effect Controls. Under Luma key, change the cutoff to around 65%. We're using the Luma key to tell Premiere that this building is the thing we want to glow. Then, under opacity, change the blend mode to pin light. Okay, now you can turn back on the eye toggle for your bottom track. Next, let's go back over to the effects panel and search for Gaussian blur. Drag the Gaussian blur effect onto your top clip on the timeline. Then in Effect Controls under Gaussian blur, increase the blurriness to your liking to get a nice looking glow effect. I also recommend checking Repeat Edge Pixels so that your glow continues to the edge of the frame. For a different look, you can change the blur dimensions to vertical or horizontal to get more of a glowy, streaky look. Alright, this glow looks good, but if you're looking for a different kind of glow, you can experiment with different blend modes under opacity. The linear dodge add will create more of an intense look. You can lower the opacity to decrease its intensity, but I kind of like how it looks at 100. One last thing you might want to do is add a color tint to your glow. To do this, go over to the effects panel and type HLS in the search box. Drag the Color Balance HLS effect onto your top clip. Now under Color Balance and Effect Controls, you can play around with adjusting the hue, lightness, and saturation to get your desired look. Okay, I really like how this glow looks now. And that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a clip to my timeline that I'd like to add my flashing lights effect to. Let's begin by right-clicking in the project panel and going to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Then position your time head to where you want the flashing effect to start. Drag your adjustment layer onto the timeline at the time head's position. Now position the time head to where you want the flashing lights to end. Drag the end of the adjustment layer to extend it to the time head's position. Next, go over to the effects panel. Type strobe into the search box. Drag the strobe light effect onto your adjustment layer. Make sure your adjustment layer is selected and then go up to Effect Controls. Under strobe light, I'm going to start by changing my strobe color to black. Then I'm going to set the strobe duration to 0.07. And I'll set my strobe period to 0.15. You can experiment with these two values, but I found these best for getting quick flashes. Okay, now when I play this back, I have a nice looking flashing color effect. If you want to use different colors like white, just change the strobe color. Solid colors like this don't look super great though, so I recommend increasing the blend with original setting to get an opaque color. Okay, now it looks a lot better. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Let's start by right-clicking in our project panel and going to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Drag your layer above your video clip and then drag its edge so that it matches the length of your clip. Now let's go to the Effects panel and search for Gaussian Blur in the search box. Drag the effect onto your adjustment layer. Make sure your adjustment layer is selected and then go up to Effect Controls. Increase the blurriness property to 100. We don't really want this black border you see here, so I'm going to check Repeat Edge Pixels. Next, expand the opacity property. Change the blending mode to linear dodge. Now we need to add some keyframes to create our pulsing light effect. Make sure that the stopwatch is selected and then change the opacity to 0% to create the first keyframe. Move the time head a little bit over and then change it to 100. Now just copy and paste these two keyframes over the length of your clip. To do this, drag to select all of your keyframes, then hold down the Alt key while dragging them. Alright, and when I play this back, we have a nice looking pulsing light effect. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this useful. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a light streaks effect in Premiere. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to add my effect to. Let's begin by holding down the Alt key and dragging the video clip onto the track above to create a duplicate. Alright, now let's head over to the Effects tab to add some effects to our top clip. In here, I have a custom bin with the 4 effects you're going to need: Directional Blur, Luma Key, Lumetri Color, and Tint. You can just use the search bar up here to find them. Then drag each one over to your top clip on the timeline. Once you added all the effects, make sure your top clip is selected and go over to Effect Controls. Under Opacity, change the blend mode to Screen. Then change the blur length to around 100 to get some light streaks. I'm also going to change the direction to 45 so that my streaks go diagonally. Next, change the Luma Key's threshold to around 40% so that your streaks are more pronounced. Then open up Basic Correction under Lumetri Color and increase the whites to 150 so the lights stand out more. Alright, this looks pretty good, but let's add a color to the tint to make it look a little trippy. Click the color picker box next to Map White 2. Now select the color you'd like to change your light streaks to. This looks good, but if you want your streaks to look even brighter, just hold down the Alt key while dragging your top clip up to create another duplicate. Alright, and that's all for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To start things off, I added some music and a video clip to my timeline. The first thing you want to do is drag the image you'd like to flicker onto your timeline. Next, drag the size of the image clip to reduce its size to about the length of a single frame. Now I'm going to position mine to right about where the drums come in. Hold down the Alt key while clicking and dragging your image to make copies of it. I'm putting about a frame's worth of space in between each copy. Once you have a few images, you can speed up the copying process by highlighting all of your images and copying and pasting them right next to each other. Make sure you only have the track you are currently editing selected, or it will paste your copied images on the wrong track. Notice how I'm positioning the time marker right where I want to paste my copies to make my frame timings accurate. Once you are finished, hit play to see your new flicker effect in action. And that's all there is to it. You now know how to create a flicker effect in Premiere. To start things off, I just added a video clip to my timeline with a separate audio track. Alright, let's begin by holding down the Alt key and dragging our video clip onto the track above it to make a duplicate. Now let's head over to the Effects panel. Type Transform into the search box. Drag the effect onto the V1 track's video clip. Then go up to the effect controls for that clip. Under Transform, uncheck Uniform Scale. Then change the scale width to -100 to flip the video. Alright, now we just need to make some cuts on our V2 track's footage to show our flip footage every other frame. Move the time head to where you want the flicker effect to start. I'm going to move mine to where the drums start. Use the bar on the bottom to zoom into your footage. Now use the razor tool to make a cut at the time head's position. Press the right arrow key once to move forward one frame. Then make another cut. Keep doing this for however long you want the effect to last. If you want to use a shortcut to speed things up, deselect all the active tracks except the one you're editing, V2. Now you can use the Ctrl-K keyboard shortcut to make cuts instead of having to use the razor tool every frame. Once you're finished making cuts, delete every other frame that you cut out. Okay, and now when I play this back, we have a cool looking flip flicker effect in Premiere. Alright, that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add this creepy looking negative effect in Premiere Pro. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to add my negative effect to. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel. Type invert into the search box. Under Channel, drag the invert effect onto your video clip. So right away, this will give you a cool looking effect, but let's say you want to make it black and white like you see in a lot of music videos. To do this, go back over to the Effects panel and type monochrome into the search box. Drag one of the monochrome presets onto the clip. I think monochrome punch looks great for this effect. Alright, and there you have it, a nice looking negative effect in Premiere. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the wave effect in Premiere Pro. To get started, I added a video clip to my timeline that has a flashing color effect on it. If you like this color effect and would like it for your own videos, at the end of this tutorial there'll be a link to a video on how to do it. But anyway, for a wave effect, let's begin by going over to the Effects panel. Type Wave Warp into the search box. Drag the effect onto your clip. Make sure your clip is selected and then go up to Effect Controls. Under Wave Warp, I'm just going to leave the wave type set to Sine. Now for the rest of these settings, I'm going to give you the ones that I have for the intro, but you're welcome to experiment to find what works best for you. First, I'm going to increase the wave height to 80. Then I'm going to set the wave width to 450. The 90-degree direction works fine since I want my wave going from side to side. However, I am going to decrease the wave speed to 0.7 to slow it down a tad. Set the pinning to all edges to get rid of the black around the outside of the video. And now when I play this back, we have a really nice looking wave effect. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a video clip to my timeline that I'd like to fade from color to black and white. Let's begin by right-clicking in the project panel and going to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Then drag your adjustment layer above your video clip on the timeline and position it to where you want to start your fade. You can also drag the adjustment layer's end to change its duration for how long you want your clip to remain black and white. Next, let's go over to the Effects panel and type Lumetri Color into the search box. Drag the Lumetri Color effect onto your adjustment layer. Now make sure your adjustment layer is selected on the timeline and go over to Effect Controls. In here, start by positioning the playhead at the start of your clip. Then open up the Creative section under Lumetri Color. Click the stopwatch next to Saturation to create a starting keyframe. Then move the playhead to where you want your clip to be faded to black and white by. Change the saturation to 0 to automatically create a second keyframe. Okay, now when I play this back, my clip fades from color to black and white. To change the speed that your clip fades, just drag the second keyframe closer or further from your first one. Now to fade your clip back to color, move the playhead to where you want to start fading it back. Then click this circle between the two arrows to create a third keyframe for the saturation's current value. Move the playhead to the end of your adjustment layer clip. Increase the saturation to 100 to create a fourth keyframe. Okay, and now when I play this back, my clip fades from black and white back to color. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to make stuff bounce in Premiere. To begin, I just added a background video along with a graphic that I'd like to make bounce to my timeline. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel and typing Transform into the search box. Drag the effect onto your image or text. Now you can animate without the transform effect, but if you want motion blur, it's a requirement. Next, let's head up to Effect Controls and scroll down to the transform effect we just added. In here, we're going to be adding a bunch of keyframes for the position property. My sequence is at 30 frames per second, so keep in mind that if your sequence is at 60 FPS, you're going to want to double all my spacings between the keyframes to match the speed of my animation. You also should make note of a Y value that you want your graphic to bounce off of during the animation. I'm just going to use the center default, which is 540. Alright, let's begin. Move the time head to where you want to start the bouncing animation. Increase the position's Y value until you can't see your graphic. Click the stopwatch toggle next to position to create a starting keyframe. Press the right arrow key 9 times to move the time head 9 frames to the right. If you're working with 60 FPS footage, move at 18 frames here. Change the Y value to where you want the animation to bounce off of to create the second keyframe. In my case, it'll be 540. Now we just want the animation to rest here for a frame. Press the right arrow key once to move the time head 1 frame to the right. Click the circle between the two arrows to create a keyframe for the current position. Press the right arrow key 13 times to move the time head 13 frames to the right. Okay, so the Y value here should be a bouncing off points value plus half of the bouncing off points value. So if you're following along, enter 810. This will put our graphic at half the distance between the starting point and the bouncing off point. Press the right arrow key to move the time head forward 1 frame. Then click the circle between the two arrows to create a keyframe for the current position. Press the right arrow key 12 more times to move the time head forward another 12 frames. Change the position's value to your bouncing off points value to create another keyframe. Again, if you just want it centered like mine, that'll be 540. Press the right arrow key 5 times to move the time head forward another 5 frames. Here, enter the value for the bouncing off points value plus 1/8 of the bouncing off points value. So if you're following my example, enter 608. Press the right arrow key once to move the time head forward 1 frame. Click the circle between the arrows to create a keyframe for the current position. Press the right arrow key 7 more times and change the position back to the bouncing off points value, which is 540 for this example. Press the right arrow key 3 times to move the time head forward 3 frames. Change the value to the bouncing off points value plus 15, so for me that'd be 555. Press the right arrow key 2 more times and change the position back to 540. Okay, now we have the basic layout for our animation, but it looks kind of stiff where the graphic bounces off the bottom. To fix this, drag to select the 4th and 5th keyframes. Right-click one of them and go to Temporal Interpolation, continuous Bezier. And I'm going to do the same thing with the 7th and 8th keyframes where it bounces off the bottom again. Okay, this looks really good. For our final touch, let's add motion blur to the effect by unchecking Use Composition Shutter Angle and changing the shutter angle to 200. And there we have a smooth looking bounce effect. Alright, that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to do an easy glitch transition. To begin, I just added 2 video clips to my timeline that I would like to add a glitch transition to. Let's start by heading over to the project panel and right-clicking inside. Go to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Right-click on your adjustment layer and select Speed/Duration. Change its duration to only last for 8 frames and hit OK. Now drag your adjustment layer onto the timeline so that it's centered exactly at the cut. If you're having a hard time centering it, you can hold down the Alt key with the adjustment layer selected, and then use the arrow keys to move it frame by frame. Once it's in place, head over to the Effects panel. Type Wave Warp into the search box. Then drag it onto your adjustment layer on the timeline. Now let's go up to Effect Controls and change some of the Wave Warp's properties. First, let's change the wave type to Noise to give it a distorted effect. Then increase the wave height to 900. Set the wave width to 2000. After that, I'm going to change the direction to 180 so that the effect looks like it's going sideways. To speed up our effect, increase the wave speed to 5. And the last thing we need to do in here is change the pinning to all edges so that we don't get any black video pulled in from outside the frame. Okay, this looks pretty good, but for a final touch, I'm going to increase the saturation of my glitch. Make sure you have your adjustment layer selected and go up to the Color tab. In here, simply turn the vibrance and saturation adjustments all the way up. Alright, now when we play this back, we have a cool, yet really easy glitch transition. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a white flash transition in Premiere. To begin, I added 2 clips to my timeline that I would like to add a white flash transition between. Start by right-clicking in the project panel and going to New Item, Color Matte. In the color picker pop-up, click in the bottom left to select a white color. Make sure the color matte you just added to the project panel is selected. Use the Ctrl-R keyboard shortcut to change the duration of the color matte. I'm going to set mine to last for 8 frames, but you can make yours longer if you want your flash to be slower. Drag your color matte clip above your 2 video clips on the timeline. Try to line it up so that the middle of the color matte clip is above the cut. Now make sure your color matte clip is selected and then go up to Effect Controls. Position the time mat at the start of the clip. Make sure the stopwatch in front of the opacity property is turned on. It should be blue. Then change the opacity's value to 0 to create a starting keyframe. Move the time head to the middle of your color matte clip. Change the opacity to 100 to create your second keyframe. Move the time head to the end of your color matte clip. Change the opacity to 0 to create your ending keyframe. Okay, and now we have our white flash transition. Alright, that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to create this diagonal fade transition. To begin, I just have 2 clips here that I'd like to put my transition between. Let's start by heading over to the Effects panel. Go to Video Transitions, Wipe, and then scroll down to the regular wipe effect. Drag it between your 2 clips. If it doesn't fit like mine, that's alright, we'll fix that next. Select the transition you just added and go up to Effect Controls. Change its speed to last for 1 second. And also switch the alignment to Center at Cut. Then click the top left corner arrow so that our wipe is diagonal. Back down on the timeline, we need to duplicate our first clip. To do this, hold down the Alt key while dragging the first clip up onto the track above. Cut the clip at the start of the transition. Then delete the footage before the cut. Now you have a couple choices here on how to extend your clip based on your footage. If, like me, you already made a cut at the end of your footage, you can just extend your duplicated clip to match the length of the transition. Otherwise, if you have nothing to extend, right-click your duplicated clip and go to Speed/Duration. Change the speed to 50% and hit OK. Next, select your duplicated clip and go over to Effect Controls. Position the time head at the start of the duplicated clip. The opacity stopwatch toggle should already be on by default, but if it's not, make sure it's turned on. Click the circle between the two arrows to create a starting keyframe. Move the time head to the end of the duplicated clip and change the opacity to 0 to create the ending keyframe. And now when I play this back, we have a diagonal faded wipe transition. Alright, that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added 2 clips to my timeline that I'd like to add a zoom transition between. Let's begin by going over to the effects panel. Type zoom in the search box. Drag the cross zoom effect between your 2 clips on the timeline. If you're having a hard time placing the transition between the clips, just select the transition on the timeline and go up to Effect Controls. Change the alignment to center at cut. Okay, now I have a pretty good looking zoom transition. I think this looks decent, but I think it would look less pixelated with a blur. To add our blur, let's first go over to the project panel. Right-click inside and go to New Item, Adjustment Layer. The default settings match my sequence, so I'm just going to hit OK. Now drag the adjustment layer above your cross zoom on the timeline, and drag its end so that its duration matches your cross zoom. Then go back to the effects panel and type Gaussian blur in the search box. Drag the Gaussian blur effect onto your adjustment layer. Now select the adjustment layer on your timeline and go up to Effect Controls. In here, position the time marker to the start of your adjustment layer clip. Under Gaussian blur, click the stopwatch next to blurriness to create a starting keyframe. Move the time marker to the middle of your clip where it looks pixelated and change the blurriness to 100 to create a second keyframe. Finally, move the time marker to the end of your clip and change the blurriness back to 0 to create a final keyframe. Okay, now when I play this back, I have a nice looking zoom transition with blur. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get things started, I just added 2 clips to my timeline that I would like to add a blur transition between. Let's begin by heading over to the effects panel. Type fast blur into the search box. Drag fast blur out onto your first clip. Then drag fast blur in onto your second clip. Alright, now when I play this back, we have a quick blur transition. This looks pretty good, but I don't like this black silhouette around the video. To fix this, select your first clip and go to Effect Controls. Under the Fast Blur effect, check Repeat Edge Pixels. Then select your second clip and check Repeat Edge Pixels there as well. Alright, and that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a stretching spin transition. To get things started, I just added 2 clips that I would like to add my transition between. Okay, now let's begin by going over to the effects panel. Type Iris Round into the search box. Drag the transition between your 2 clips. If it doesn't stick in the middle like mine, that's alright, we'll fix that next. Select your transition and then go up to Effect Controls. Change the duration to last for 35 frames. Then change the alignment to center at cut. Alright, now that we have the start of our transition, we're ready to add the stretching spin effect. Go over to the effects panel and type twirl into the search box. Drag the effect onto your first clip. Then go up to Effect Controls for that clip and scroll down to the twirl effect. Alright, the first thing we're going to do in here is set up the twirl's animation by using the angle property. Position the time head at the start of the transition. Then press the left arrow key 8 times to move the time head 8 frames back. Click the stopwatch toggle next to angle to create a starting keyframe. Move the time head to the end of the transition and change the angle to 425 to create the ending keyframe. And I'm also going to increase the twirl radius to 35. Okay, this is getting closer to what we want, but unfortunately we're getting some black pulled in from our twirl. To fix this, we're just going to zoom into the frame a little. Click the left arrow next to the angle property to position the time head at the start of the animation. Then click the stopwatch toggle next to scale to create a starting keyframe for the zoom. Use the right arrow next to the angle property to position the time head at the end of the transition. Then increase the scale to 250 to create the ending keyframe. And now when I play this back, we have a cool looking stretching spin transition. Okay, that's all for me. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get things started, I just have two video clips here that I would like to add a spin transition between. Let's begin by right-clicking in the project panel and going to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Drag the adjustment layer onto your timeline. Right-click the adjustment layer and go to Speed/Duration. Change the duration so that it lasts for 16 frames. Now position the adjustment layer so that the middle of it is right above the cut. If you're having trouble placing it in the exact spot, position the time head at the cut and press the left arrow key 8 times. Then drag the clip to the time head's position. Next, head over to the Effects panel and type Transform into the search box. Drag the Transform effect onto your adjustment layer. This effect is going to allow us to rotate and scale the two bottom clips by using our adjustment layer. This way we can easily reuse this adjustment layer multiple times or even create a preset for it. Now make sure your adjustment layer is selected and then go up to the Effect Controls panel. Scroll down to the Transform effect. First we're going to increase the scale so that when we rotate our video we won't see any black bars. Move the time head to the start of the clip. Then click the timer button next to the scale property to create the first keyframe. Again, make sure you are changing these properties under the transform effect and not in the motion area or the effect won't work. Now move the time head to the middle of your adjustment layer and change the scale to 300 to create your second keyframe. Then move the time head to the end of the clip and change the scale to 100 to create the last keyframe. Okay, now that we have our zoom taken care of, we're going to adjust the transform effect's rotation property. Position the time head at the start of your clip. Click the timer button next to the rotation property to create the first keyframe. Press the right arrow key 3 times to move the time head 3 frames to the right. Change the rotation value to about 5 degrees to create the second keyframe. This value might be slightly different for you, but the thing you need to keep in mind is that you don't want any black video showing around the edges. Next, move the time head to the middle of your clip and change the rotation to 180 degrees to create your third keyframe. Then position the time head at the end of the clip and change the value to 360 to create your fourth keyframe. Press the left arrow key 3 times and then change the rotation to about 354 to create the final keyframe for the rotation. And now when I play this back, we have a spinning transition. To make it look a little nicer, let's add a blur effect to it. Go to the Effects panel. Then type Directional Blur in the search box. Drag it onto your adjustment layer. Go up to Effect Controls and scroll down to the Directional Blur effect. Move the time head to the start of the clip. Click the timer button next to the Blur Length property to create the first keyframe. Press the right arrow key 3 times to move the time head 3 frames to the right. Then change the blur length to 20 to create the second keyframe. Position the time head at the end of the clip and change the blur length to 0 to create another keyframe. Finally, press the left arrow key 3 times and change the blur length to 20 to create the last keyframe. And now when I play this back, we have a cool looking spin transition effect. Alright, and that's all for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the crop transition effect. To start things off, I just added a short video clip to my timeline. Let's begin by heading over to the Effects panel. Type barn doors in the search box. Drag the transition onto the start of your clip. I also want to show you how to do this at the end of a clip, so drag the transition onto the end of your clip as well. As you can see, this transition is already pretty close to what we want, but the crop should be going from the bottom and top. To do this, select your starting transition and go up to Effect Controls. In here, you should see a little orientation preview with arrows on all sides. Click the bottom or top arrow so that the crop starts vertically. Back on my timeline, I'm also going to drag the end of my transition to make its duration last a little longer. Now when I play this back, we have a nice looking opening crop transition. Next, select your ending transition and go up to Effect Controls. Click the top or bottom orientation arrows again to set the transition vertically. When I play this back, the crop is happening from the middle though, which isn't what we want here. To fix this, make sure your transition is selected and go back up to Effect Controls. Click the checkbox next to the Reverse property. I'm also going to quickly increase the duration of my effect. And now when I play this back, the crop transition closes how we want it to. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this cool flash effect. To get started, I just added 2 clips to my timeline that I'd like to add my flash effect between. Let's begin by right-clicking inside the project panel and going to New Item, Adjustment Layer. Then right-click your adjustment layer in the project panel and go to Speed/Duration. I'm going to delete the default 5 seconds and change the last 2 zeros to 15 so that my adjustment layer lasts for 15 frames. If you want a faster or slower flash, you can make it last for a few frames more or less. Then drag your adjustment layer onto the track above your clips and center it above the cut. If you're having a hard time centering it above the cut, position your time marker at the cut and use this bar down here to zoom into the timeline. Select your adjustment layer, and then while holding down the Alt key on your keyboard, press the right or left arrow keys to nudge the clip so that it's centered over the cut. If you're using a Mac, hold down the Option key while using the arrow keys. Once your adjustment layer is centered over the cut, go over to the Effects panel. Type Brightness into the search box. Drag the Brightness and Contrast effect onto your adjustment layer. Make sure your adjustment layer is selected and go over to Effect Controls. Position the time marker at the start of your adjustment layer clip. Click the stopwatch next to both Brightness and Contrast to create starting keyframes. Move the time marker to the middle of the adjustment layer. Increase the brightness and contrast to 100 to create 2 more keyframes in the middle of your adjustment layer. Then position your time marker at the end of your adjustment layer clip. Change the brightness and contrast back to 0 to create ending keyframes. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a nice looking flash effect in Premiere Pro. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added an audio clip to my timeline that I like to make sound like a phone call. Hey, how are you? How's it going? Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel and typing High Pass into the search box. Drag the effect onto your audio on the timeline. Make sure your audio is selected and go over to Effect Controls. Under High Pass, change the cutoff anywhere from 400 to 1000 based on what sounds best for your clip. I'm going to set mine to 700. Okay, and now when I play this back, my audio sounds like I'm on the phone. Hey, how are you? How's it going? Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To start things off, I added a video with some music. Now the first thing we want to do is make a cut where we want the underwater effect to start. Select the Cut tool. Then drag your playhead to where you want the effect to start. I'm going to set mine to where he's underwater. Now cut your audio track. Next, head over to the Effects pane. Type Low Pass into the search box. Drag the effect onto your audio track you cut out. Now when I play this back, we have a nice sounding underwater sound effect. If you want to increase the intensity of the underwater sound, select your audio track with the effect, go to Effect Controls, and in the Low Pass effect settings, lower the cutoff. Alright, and there you have it. I hope you found this tutorial useful. To get started, I just added an audio clip to my timeline that I'd like to make deeper. This voice clip will be deeper. Let's begin by going over to the Effects panel. Type Pitch into the search box. Drag the pitch shifter effect that isn't obsolete onto your audio clip. Then make sure your audio clip is selected and go up to Effect Controls. Under Pitch Shifter, click the Edit button next to Custom Setup. Lower the amount of semitones by dragging the slider to the left. You also want to make sure High Precision is selected and Use Appropriate Default Settings is checked. Then just close out of the window and play back your audio.
This voice clip will be deeper.
Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added a clip with some audio that I want to sound distant and muffled like it's coming from the inside of the car. Let's begin by going over to the effects panel and typing equalizer into the search box. Drag the parametric equalizer effect onto your audio clip. Then make sure your audio is selected and go up to Effect Controls. Under Parametric Equalizer, click Edit. In the pop-up, change the preset to Generic Low Pass. Then drag this point over here down and to the left to create a distant muffled sound. You can experiment with moving around this point to get the muffled sound you like. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time. To get started, I just added some audio to my timeline that I'd like to distort. Let's begin by making a cut in your audio where you want the distortion effect to start. And I'm going to make another cut where I want the distortion to end. Okay, so the easiest way to add distortion to your audio is to just use a preset. To do that, I'm going to go over to the Effects tab and open up the Audio Effects folder. Scroll down until you see the distortion effect. Drag it onto the audio clip you cut out. Make sure your cutout clip is selected and head over to Effect Controls. Next to distortion, you should see this little circular arrow. Click it and select one of the presets. Just experiment around and find one that you like. Alright, this works fine, but I'm going to show you how to add a more custom distortion effect with bass if that's what you're looking for. First, I'm going to just delete this distortion effect and re-add the effect to my clip so that we can start from a fresh slate. Back up in Effect Controls under the distortion effect next to Custom Setup, click Edit. Drag the middle of the positive line all the way up to this corner. And drag the negative one all the way down to this corner. Now just close out of this and go back down to the Effects tab. Type bass into the search box. Drag the effect onto your audio clip. Then type treble into the search box. Drag the treble effect onto your audio clip. Back up in Effect Controls under bass, increase the boost to 24. Then go under the treble effect and increase its boost to 24. Okay, and now when I play this back, I have a cool sounding distorted bass boost effect. Alright, and that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you next time.